A 26-year-old housekeeper from Indonesia died of poisoning 24 hours after accidentally finding the key to the locked basement of a Saudi prince's palace. Her death was officially ruled as acute heart failure. Siti arrived in Riyadh in early May 2023. An agency in Jakarta promised her a dream job: $800 a month, a private room, meals, and 2 days off per week, which she could save up and use to travel home once a year. For a girl from a small village in central Java, where her parents had grown rice all their lives, this amount seemed like a fortune. Siti was the eldest of 3 children, and the responsibility for the whole family rested on her shoulders. Her father suffered from back pain and could no longer work in the fields, and her mother earned extra money by sewing, but it was barely enough to put food on the table. Her younger sister, the smartest in her class, dreamed of going to college and becoming a teacher. The $600 that Siti planned to send home each month would not only feed her family, but also allow them to build a new brick house to replace their old wooden one, which was in danger of collapsing during the rainy season. The palace where she was taken was located in a prestigious area of Riyadh, hidden behind a high white fence. It did not resemble traditional Arab buildings, but rather a modern European villa of gigantic proportions. 3 floors, 40 rooms, a swimming pool, a tennis court, and a garden that seemed to Siti larger than her entire village. Inside, there was sterile cleanliness, white marble, panoramic windows, minimalist furniture. She was greeted by the head butler, a 60-year-old man named Ibrahim, an Egyptian who had worked for the royal family for most of his life. He spoke broken English, but his tone brooked no argument. He led Siti to the servants' wing, showed her a small but clean room, and explained the rules. Up at 5 in the morning, work until 9 in the evening with a break for lunch. No unnecessary conversation with the owners, no strangers in the house, no photographs. Siti was one of 15 members of the service staff: cooks, gardeners, drivers, security guards, and housekeepers, mostly Filipinos, Indonesians, and Ethiopians. She was assigned to the East Wing, where the owners' bedrooms, guest rooms, and private offices were located. The work was monotonous, but not too hard. Making beds, dusting countless surfaces, cleaning bathrooms that sparkled with gold and marble. Prince Faisal, the king's 38-year-old nephew, was the master of the palace. He lived there with his wife and 2 small children. For the first few months, Siti only saw him briefly. He was polite, sometimes nodding to her in greeting, but never speaking. His wife, the princess, spent most of her time in the women's quarters of the palace or out on business, leaving the nannies to raise the children. For the first 3 months, life in the palace seemed predictable and almost peaceful to Siti. She got used to the routine and made friends with the other maids, especially Rosa, a Filipina who had been working there for 2 years. Every week, Siti called home via video chat. She showed her parents her room, told them how well she was fed, how polite her employers were. She never showed them the palace itself, afraid of breaking the rules and not wanting to cause envy or unnecessary questions. She listened proudly as her father talked about the construction of their new house. The foundation had already been laid, and bricks had been purchased. Her younger sister had passed her exams and enrolled in a teacher training college in a neighboring town. The money Siti sent was working. Her sacrifice had meaning. The first oddity appeared at the end of August. During the briefing for the new group of servants, Ibrahim, the head butler, took them to the service corridor on the 1st floor. At the very end of the corridor was a heavy steel door with no handle, only a keyhole. Ibrahim stopped in front of it and looked at everyone sternly. "This door leads to the basement," he said slowly, choosing his English words carefully. "It is always locked. You are forbidden to even approach this door. Any attempt to open it or ask questions about it will result in immediate dismissal and deportation. This is a personal order from His Highness. Do you all understand?" Everyone nodded silently. No one had any questions. In a world where your fate and the well-being of your family depended on a single word from your master, orders were not discussed. Siti tried to forget about this door, but soon noticed another oddity. Sometimes, usually late in the evening, Prince Faisal would seclude himself. He did not leave the palace. His cars remained in the garage. He simply disappeared for 3 or 4 hours. The other servants whispered that he was working in his office or relaxing in his private cinema. But Siti, cleaning the east wing, knew that he was not in his office, bedroom, or any other room. Once, staying late to polish the parquet floor in the long corridor, she saw the prince come out of his bedroom, dressed in simple dark clothes, and head not for the main exit, but for the service corridor. He walked silently, like a shadow, and disappeared around the corner leading to that very steel door. 3.5 hours later, he returned. Siti was finishing cleaning the hall at that moment. The prince walked past her without noticing her. His face was pale, his eyes feverishly shining. He wore thin black leather gloves on his hands. He did not go to his bedroom. Instead, he approached the huge fireplace in the main hall, where a fire was almost never lit. He took off his gloves, threw them into the fireplace, then took out a lighter and set them alight. He stood for several minutes, watching the leather shrink and turn to ash. Only then did he turn and silently walk away to his chambers. Siti froze with the mop in her hands, her heart pounding. She saw it twice more over the next month. The same routine, going down to the basement, returning a few hours later, burning gloves. No one seemed to pay any attention to it. It was just another quirk of a rich and influential man that had nothing to do with her. She continued to work, send money home, and count the days until her vacation, trying to convince herself that she was just imagining it all. But a quiet voice inside her told her that something dark and wrong was hidden behind the white walls of this palace. One night in early October, Siti woke up to a strange sound. It was barely audible, as if coming from far away. She sat up in bed, listening. The sound was like a muffled moan or cry. It was coming from somewhere above, from the ventilation shaft, the grate of which was directly above her bed. Siti froze, trying to figure out if it was a dream, but the sound repeated itself, this time more clearly. It was a woman's voice, saying something in Arabic. Siti didn't know the language, but the intonation was full of despair and pain. The voice begged for something, then turned into a muffled cry that ended abruptly. Silence fell. Siti sat in the dark, her body covered in cold sweat. She didn't move, afraid to make a sound. 10 minutes later, she heard quiet footsteps in the hallway, moving away toward the master's wing. She didn't sleep until morning. As soon as dawn broke, she slipped out of her room and knocked on the door next door, where Rosa lived. The Filipina opened the door, sleepy and grumpy. Siti stammered as she told her what she had heard during the night. Rosa listened to her, her face growing more and more serious. She pulled Siti into her room and closed the door. "Forget about it," she whispered, looking Siti straight in the eye. "You didn't hear anything. Understand? Nothing." Siti didn't understand. But it was a scream. Someone was asking for help, she insisted. Rosa's face contorted with fear. "Listen to me," she said harshly. "The girl who worked here before you was also Indonesian. Her name was Ani. She also started asking questions. She said she heard strange noises. One day, she disappeared. Ibrahim told us she was fired for stealing and deported. But I don't believe it. None of us believe it. We didn't see her leave. Her things were left in the room. They were just thrown away. If you want to survive here and help your family, you will keep quiet. You saw nothing and heard nothing." These words silenced Siti. Fear for her own life and fear for her family's future outweighed her curiosity and compassion. She nodded to Rosa, promised to keep quiet, and went back to work. But now every rustle in the palace, every glance from the prince, every shadow in the corridor caused her to panic. She tried to work faster, avoid unnecessary contact, and be invisible. The nighttime scream would not leave her mind. She imagined the face of that girl, Annie, and wondered what had become of her. She continued to send money home, but now her joy at her family's success was mixed with a bitter feeling of guilt and fear. A week passed. Sidi almost convinced herself that she had dreamed the scream, that Rosa's words were just an exaggeration. She was gathering the prince's clothes to send to the laundry. She mechanically checked the jacket pockets, as Ibrahim had taught them. In one of the inside pockets, her fingers found something hard and cold. She pulled it out. It was a key, an ordinary steel key, but not one for the palace rooms. It was larger, more massive, with a non-standard beard. Sidi immediately understood which door this key was for. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed to be heard throughout the palace. She looked around. There was no one in the corridor. Quickly slipping the key into her uniform pocket, she took the clothes to the laundry room. All day long, she felt the key burning her thigh through the fabric. She had a plan, a risky, crazy plan that could cost her everything. But she could no longer live in ignorance. She had to find out what was behind that door. The next day, she had a few hours off to buy some things for herself. Instead of going to the market, she took a taxi to the old part of town, where there were many small workshops. She found a locksmith, an elderly Pakistani man sitting in a tiny shop cluttered with locks and keys. With trembling hands, she handed him the key. "I need a copy. Very urgently," she said. The man took the key, turned it in his hands, and grunted. "It's a complicated lock. $50, he said. It was almost all of her monthly savings, money she had been putting aside for a gift for her mother. But Sidi agreed without hesitation. Half an hour later, she had 2 keys in her hands. She discreetly returned the original to the pocket of the same jacket when it came back from the cleaners. She kept the copy. She waited for the right moment for almost 2 weeks. The prince led an active social life, often leaving for night meetings and events. Sidi kept track of his schedule by eavesdropping on the staff's conversations. Finally, one night, she learned that the prince had left for an official reception at the embassy and would not return until morning. The palace fell silent after midnight. The staff dispersed to their rooms. Sidi waited until 3 in the morning, when everyone was in the deepest sleep. She put on dark clothes, slipped her phone and key into her pocket, and slipped out of her room. She walked through the sleeping palace like a ghost. Every creak of the parquet floor echoed in her ears like a gunshot. She reached the service corridor and the steel door. Her heart was pounding in her throat. Her hands were shaking so much that she had trouble inserting the key into the keyhole. It turned with a quiet click. Sidi held her breath and opened the door slightly. Behind it was a narrow concrete staircase leading down into the darkness. She turned on the flashlight on her phone, and the beam revealed bare walls covered with mold. Covering her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming, she began to descend. At the bottom was a short corridor that ended in another door, this time metal, like a bank vault. It was unlocked. Sidi pushed it, and the door opened silently inward. The smell hit her nose immediately, a mixture of old blood, disinfectants, and human fear. The room was small, about 4 by 6 meters. The walls were covered with dark gray soundproofing material. Chains with handcuffs at the ends hung from the ceiling. Dark brown stains were visible on the concrete floor, which she immediately recognized as dried blood. In one corner stood a large metal cage, inside which lay a dirty mattress and a plastic bucket. But the most frightening thing was in the other corner. On a small metal shelf lay a neat stack of passports. Sidi moved closer, her legs feeling like cotton wool. She took the top passport, Indonesia. She opened it. A photo of a young, smiling girl. Name, Ani Suryani, the very girl Rosa had talked about. Siti leafed through the passports one by one, her hands shaking more and more. 3 Filipinas, 2 Ethiopians, 1 Kenyan, 1 Nepalese, 7 passports in total, not counting Ani's. All young women, all domestic workers, judging by their visas. The last page of each passport had a stamp showing entry into Saudi Arabia. The dates ranged from 2018 to 2023. None had an exit stamp. Next to the passports lay a small leather-bound notebook. Siti opened it. It was a diary, a torture diary. Prince Faisal kept detailed records of each session, as he called them. Dates, names, descriptions of what he did. Siti read the lines and was overcome with horror. He described the screams, tears, and blood with the cold, detached precision of an entomologist studying an insect. The last entry was dated a week earlier. The name in it was Arabic, which Siti didn't know. The entry ended with the phrase, "The subject became too noisy. Had to stop the experiment." Siti realized she had to act. She took out her phone and started taking pictures. The room, the chains, the cage, every page of the passports, every page of the notebook. She took picture after picture, afraid that her phone would run out of battery or that she would be caught. She worked quickly, methodically, adrenaline drowning out her fear. After taking about 50 photos, she put her phone in her pocket, left the room, and closed the metal door. She climbed the stairs and locked the top door with a key. She returned to her room when the horizon was already beginning to lighten in the east. She knew she had signed her own death warrant. Now the only question was whether she would manage to drag her executioner to the grave with her. Returning to her room, Siti sat on the edge of the bed, trying to stop herself from shaking. Her mind was racing, considering the options. Run. Where to? They wouldn't let her into the airport without a passport, and her passport was in Ibrahim's safe. Go to the police? Who would believe an Indonesian housekeeper accusing the king's nephew of serial murder? She would most likely be arrested for slander and disappear, just like the 7 women in the passport photos. There was only one way left. She connected to the palace Wi-Fi, opened her messenger app, and found the contact details of her best childhood friend, Farah, who lived in Jakarta. They wrote to each other almost every day. She created an archived file with all the photos, password protected it, and sent it to Farah. Then she wrote a short message. Farah, this is very important. Don't open the file until I tell you to. The password is my mother's name. If I don't get in touch within 48 hours, not a single message, not a single call, nothing. Then you must open this file and publish its entire contents on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere you can. Tag all the news agencies, human rights organizations, our government. Write that this was sent by me, Siti, who works at Prince Faisal's palace in Riyadh. Write that I am dead. Promise me you'll do it. A minute later, Farah replied, Siti, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Siti wrote, just promise. Farah replied, I promise. Siti deleted the conversation from her phone and went to bed, but she couldn't sleep. In the morning, she acted as usual. She got up at 5 a.m., put on her uniform, and went to clean the east wing. She avoided looking other servants in the eye, afraid that her fear was written on her face. As she was cleaning the prince's office, he walked in. This was unusual. He was usually in the gym at this time. He stopped in the doorway, looking at her. Siti froze with the rag in her hand, her heart sinking. Good morning, Siti, he said in his usual polite tone. But there was something new in his eyes, something cold and appraising. Good morning, Your Highness, she murmured, not looking up. He stood there for a few more seconds, then asked, Did you sleep well tonight? No nightmares? Her blood ran cold. It couldn't be a coincidence. He knew. Maybe he had found traces of her being downstairs. Maybe there was a camera not only outside, but also inside. Or maybe one of the servants had seen her and reported it. Siti felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. No, Your Highness. I slept well, thank you, she replied, trying to keep her voice from trembling. The prince nodded, his lips curving into a semblance of a smile. "That's good," he said, and left the office. Siti leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. 48 hours. She had to hold out for 48 hours. She worked all day, as if in a fog. Every minute dragged on forever. She waited for them to come for her at any moment, grab her, drag her downstairs to that very room. But nothing happened. Life in the palace went on as usual. In the evening, when she was finishing work, Ibrahim found her. "The prince is calling you," he said in his usual impassive tone. Siti followed him, her legs feeling like lead. The prince was sitting in his chair in the living room, reading a book. He looked up when she entered. "Siti," he said, "could you bring me some tea? English breakfast with milk and no sugar." This was also unusual. The prince's tea was always served by another maid, an Ethiopian woman named Layla, who had been trained in the proper ceremony. Siti nodded and went to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking as she brewed the tea. She placed the cup on a tray and carried it to the prince. He took the cup, took a sip, thanked her, and sent her away. Siti returned to the kitchen feeling completely devastated. Layla, who was having dinner at the time, looked at her in surprise. "He asked you to bring him tea. That's strange," she said. Siti shrugged. There was a teapot with leftover tea on the table. Siti was exhausted and thirsty. She poured herself a cup from the same pot, drank it in one gulp, and went to her room. She lay down on the bed without undressing and fell into a restless sleep. She woke up an hour later with a sharp, piercing pain in her stomach. The pain was so severe that she doubled over, gasping for breath. She began to vomit. Her body shook with convulsions, and she fell from the bed onto the floor. She tried to call for help, but only a wheeze came out of her throat. Rosa, hearing the noise in her room, ran in and screamed in horror when she saw Siti thrashing on the floor with foam at her mouth. Rosa called the other servants, and they tried to help and called an ambulance. But a few minutes later, Ibrahim entered the room. He was calm, as always. "Cancel the call," he ordered. "It's just food poisoning. His Highness's personal physician is already on his way." The servants looked at him in confusion, but no one dared to disobey. They carried Siti back to her bed. Her convulsions were weakening, her breathing becoming intermittent. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes frozen in the horror of realization. Tea. It was the tea. He had poisoned her. She thought of her family, her new home, her sister in college. 48 hours. "Please, Farah, don't forget." That was her last thought. The prince's personal physician arrived 40 minutes later. By that time, Siti was already dead. The doctor conducted a quick examination. He asked if she had any health complaints. Ibrahim said she sometimes complained of heart palpitations. The doctor nodded and filled out the death certificate. The official cause of death was acute heart failure, caused by an undiagnosed congenital heart defect. Siti's body was taken away that same evening. The Indonesian embassy was notified of the death of their citizen from natural causes. Siti's family in the village was told that their daughter had died in her sleep from a heart attack. Meanwhile, in Jakarta, Farah waited. 24 hours passed. 36, 40, not a single message from Siti. Farah wrote to her again and again, but the messages remained unread. When 50 hours had passed since Siti's last message, Farah realized that the worst had happened. With trembling hands, she entered the password, Siti's mother's name. The archive opened. Photos appeared on her laptop screen. A torture chamber, chains, blood, passports of dead women, the prince's diary. Farah screamed, covering her mouth with her hands. She cried for several minutes, then pulled herself together. She had promised. She created an anonymous Twitter account and began posting the photos, one after another. She added hashtags to each one. Justice for Siti. Saudi Prince. Torture Chamber. tagging the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, human rights organizations Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, and the official accounts of the Indonesian government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The first post appeared late in the evening, Jakarta time. At first, no one paid any attention to it, but an hour later, an Indonesian journalist noticed it. He retweeted it. Then another. 3 hours later, the hashtag #JusticeForCity was trending on Indonesian Twitter. By morning, the whole world was discussing it. The post went viral. 8 million views in 12 hours, tens of thousands of retweets. The world's media picked up the story. Photos of the torture chamber and the passports of the murdered women were on the front pages of all news sites. Faced with a wave of public anger, the Indonesian government issued an official statement demanding that Saudi Arabia conduct an immediate and transparent investigation into Siti's death and verify the information published online. The governments of the Philippines, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nepal joined the demand when they learned that their citizens might be among the victims. Saudi Arabia found itself at the center of an international scandal. Attempts to block posts on social media failed as the information spread too quickly. Under enormous international pressure, the king was forced to order an official investigation. A team of investigators arrived at Prince Faisal's palace. The prince denied everything, calling it a conspiracy by enemies of the kingdom. But when the investigators presented him with a search warrant for the basement, he turned pale. The torture chamber was found exactly where Siti had described it. Everything was in place: chains, a cage, dried blood. However, the shelves with passports and diaries were empty. The prince had managed to get rid of the main evidence, but he didn't take one thing into account. The investigators had brought sniffer dogs with them. In the palace garden, under recently planted rose bushes, the dogs found the remains of 4 women. DNA testing later confirmed their identities. They were the girls whose passports Siti had photographed. The arrest of Prince Faisal was an unprecedented event in the modern history of Saudi Arabia. A member of the royal family, the nephew of the ruling monarch, was taken into custody and placed in a detention center. It was a shock to the entire country, where the royal family had traditionally been above the law. The search of the palace and the discovery of the remains turned an international scandal into a full-blown political crisis. The king was faced with a choice: protect the family's honor or sacrifice his nephew to preserve the country's reputation on the world stage. Under pressure from world leaders and the threat of economic sanctions, he chose the latter. The trial was completely closed. No journalists, no public. The details of the investigation and court hearings were kept strictly confidential. The official Saudi media covered the event very sparingly, reporting only that an investigation is underway into offenses committed by a member of the royal family. The prince was defended by a team of the country's best lawyers, who tried to build a defense based on the fact that the prince suffers from a severe mental disorder and was not responsible for his actions. However, the evidence gathered by the investigation was too compelling. Testimony from palace staff, Rosa, and other servants about the prince's strange behavior and the disappearance of previous housekeepers. Financial reports showing that the prince had ordered special equipment found in the torture chamber through front companies. Cell phone operator data that tracked his movements inside the palace. The prosecution insisted on the maximum punishment, but the death penalty for a member of the royal family was unthinkable. The trial lasted 8 months. The outside world received information only through leaks and anonymous sources. Finally, in mid-2024, the Saudi Arabian state news agency issued a brief official statement. It said that Prince Faisal had been found guilty of a series of murders and sentenced by a Sharia court to 30 years in prison. The court also ordered him to pay monetary compensation to the families of all identified victims. It was the harshest sentence possible under the circumstances. The prince was transferred to a special prison for high-ranking officials, where conditions were far from normal, but he lost his freedom. The City family in an Indonesian village received $2 million in compensation. The money changed their lives, but it did not bring their daughter back. The father stopped working, and the mother was able to receive quality medical treatment. The younger sister graduated from college, became a teacher, and now works at a local school that was renovated with money donated by the family. They built a new house, but Siti's room remained empty, just as it was before she left for Saudi Arabia. They never gave interviews, turning down all offers from TV channels and newspapers. The only thing Siti's father said to a local reporter was, "She wanted us to live better, but not at this price. No amount of money can replace my daughter." The scandal had far-reaching consequences. Indonesia, the Philippines, and several other countries in Asia and Africa imposed a temporary ban on sending their citizens to work as domestic servants in Saudi Arabia and some other Gulf countries. Negotiations were initiated to revise bilateral agreements, which included new, stricter requirements for the protection of workers' rights, including mandatory registration with the embassy, regular inspections of working conditions, and the creation of emergency communication channels. Recruitment agencies came under strict control, and many of them had their licenses revoked for sending workers without proper guarantees. The City case became a catalyst for the movement for migrant workers' rights in the Middle East. Activists and human rights organizations used her story as an example of the systemic problems faced by millions of foreign workers. Support groups appeared on social media, where domestic workers anonymously shared their stories of abuse and exploitation, helping each other and drawing attention to the problem. Siti's friend, Farah, who posted the photos, received thousands of threats from Saudi nationalists, but also tremendous support from around the world. The Indonesian government provided her with protection. She became an activist for the rights of migrant workers and founded the Siti Foundation, which provides legal and financial assistance to women who have suffered violence at the hands of employers abroad. Prince Faisal's palace was confiscated by the state and demolished. A public park was built in its place. The story of the abusive prince and the brave housekeeper who sacrificed her life for justice became a dark urban legend in Riyadh, whispered as a reminder that even behind the highest fences and the whitest walls, unimaginable evil can lurk. A Pakistani taxi driver discovered that his wife was pregnant by an influential Emirati sheikh. A few days later, they were both found dead in a forest outside the city. Imran came to Dubai 7 years ago with one goal: to earn money for his family. He was 27 years old, with an unfinished education at a technical college in Karachi and a huge responsibility on his shoulders. After his father's death, he became the sole breadwinner for his mother and 2 younger brothers, who were studying at university. There were no jobs in Pakistan, and those that did exist paid peanuts. Dubai seemed like the promised land, a place where anyone willing to work 14 hours a day could provide a decent life for their loved ones. Imran borrowed money from relatives to pay for a work visa and a ticket, promising to repay the debt within a year. The reality turned out to be harsher than expected. For the first 2 years, he lived in a 10-square-meter room, which he shared with 5 other Pakistanis. He worked as a taxi driver, 12 hours a shift, 6 days a week. He earned about $2,000 a month, of which he sent 1,000 home. 300 went to rent, food, and minimal expenses. He saved the rest. He dreamed of the day when he could return home with enough money to buy a small house and start his own business. After 3 years, he had saved enough to get married. Aisha was the daughter of a distant relative from his home village near Karachi. She was 20 years old, had finished school, and could read and write English, which was rare for girls from their social circle. Their parents introduced them, and after 3 months of correspondence and several video calls, they got married. The wedding was modest. Imran flew in for a week, they had the ceremony, and he returned to Dubai to arrange the paperwork for her to move there. 6 months later, Aisha received her visa and joined him. They rented a 1-room apartment in Dera, one of the oldest and cheapest areas of Dubai, populated mainly by migrant workers. The rent was $600 a month. The apartment was tiny, with one window overlooking a narrow street lined with cars. In the summer, the air conditioner ran around the clock. Otherwise, it was impossible to stay inside. But it was their home, and they were happy. Aisha needed a job, and after 2 months of searching, she found work as a salesperson at the Dubai Mall, one of the largest shopping centers in the world. She was hired in the section selling luxury Swiss watches. The salary was $900 a month, plus a small commission on sales. Now they earned almost $3,000 between them, sent 1,000 home, and saved and spent the rest on living expenses. Imran and Aisha's life was measured and predictable. Imran worked from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, driving tourists and locals around the city, listening to their conversations in languages he didn't understand, and dreaming of the future. Aisha stood behind the counter from 10 in the morning until 8 in the evening, smiling at wealthy customers, showing them watches worth tens of thousands of dollars, and returning home exhausted. On Fridays, they went to the mosque. On weekends, they cooked homemade meals and video called their relatives. They planned their lives 5 years ahead, save $50,000, return to Pakistan, buy a house, open a shop or a small factory, maybe have children. These plans were their anchor, what made them endure the heat, fatigue, homesickness, and humiliation they sometimes had to endure from arrogant customers. Rashid Al Maktoum first appeared in the store where Aisha worked in early spring. He was 45 years old, belonged to one of the influential Emirati families, owned a chain of hotels, and had a reputation for spending money easily and generously. He came accompanied by his personal assistant, dressed casually but expensively. He asked to be shown the most exclusive models. Aisha, as expected, showed him one watch after another, telling him about the mechanisms, the history of the brands, and the uniqueness of each model. He listened inattentively, but looked at her intently. That day, he bought a watch for $45,000, paid by card, and left, leaving Aisha a generous tip of $500, which was unusual but not prohibited. He returned a week later, and again a week after that. Each time he bought something expensive, lingered at the counter, and asked questions, sometimes personal ones. Where she was from, how long she had been in Dubai, whether she liked it here. Aisha answered politely but briefly, feeling uncomfortable. She told Imran about a regular customer who spent tens of thousands per visit. Imran shrugged. Rich people. They have nothing else to do. But after a month, Rashid's visits became more frequent, and one day he made an unexpected offer. He came at the end of the working day, when there were almost no customers in the store. He asked Aisha to show him the new collection, and then, when she finished the presentation, he said, "Aisha, I can see that you are a talented salesperson. You understand taste and know how to communicate with customers. I need a personal shopping consultant. I often buy gifts for business partners and family members. I want you to help me with my choices. A few hours a week in your free time. I'll pay you $5,000 a month in addition to your salary." Aisha was taken aback. $5,000 was more than she and Imran earned together. She said she had to consult with her husband. Rashid smiled and gave her his business card. "Of course. Think about it and call me." That evening, Aisha told Imran about the offer. Imran was cautious. "Why did he choose you? There are many salespeople in the store." Aisha shrugged. "Maybe I'm really good at it. It's just shopping, consulting. Nothing bad." Imran thought about it. $5,000 meant they could save up for a house in 2 years instead of 5. That his brothers could finish college without debt. That his mother could get better medical care. He nodded. "Okay, but if something goes wrong, you quit immediately. Promise me." Aisha called Rashid the next day and accepted. For the first 2 months, Everything was exactly as he had promised. He sent a car to pick her up 2 or 3 times a week after her workday. They went to boutiques, and she helped him choose watches, jewelry, and accessories. Rashid was polite, kept his distance, and was always accompanied by a driver or assistant. He paid exactly $5,000 in cash at the end of each month. Aisha brought the money home, and she and Imran opened a separate savings account. Their dream was getting closer every day. But after 2 months, something changed. Rashid started giving Aisha gifts. At first they were small, and he explained that they were a token of gratitude for her excellent work. A box of Swiss chocolates, a bottle of French perfume. Then the gifts became more expensive. Gold earrings worth $3,000, a designer Hermes bag for $12,000. Aisha tried to refuse, but he insisted. "It's nothing to me. You deserve it." She brought everything home and showed Imran. Imran frowned. "This is too much. No one gives gifts like this for no reason." Aisha defended herself. "For him, it's really nothing. You've seen how much he spends. Maybe it's their culture to give generous gifts." But Imran felt that something was wrong. In the 3rd month, Rashid invited Aisha to a business dinner. He explained that he was meeting with an important business partner to whom he wanted to give an exclusive watch, and he needed her advice. The meeting was scheduled at the Burj Al Arab hotel restaurant, one of the most expensive and prestigious places in Dubai. Aisha hesitated. She had never been to such places and felt that this was beyond the scope of their agreement. But Rashid convinced her that it was purely a business meeting, that the partner had already confirmed his attendance, and that it would take a maximum of 2 hours. She agreed, telling Imran that she had a business meeting with a client. Imran frowned, but said nothing. When Aisha arrived at the restaurant, only Rashid was there to greet her. He explained that the partner was running late and asked her to sit down and wait. He ordered dinner. The waiter brought champagne. Aisha refused, explaining that she did not drink alcohol due to her religious beliefs. Rashid insisted gently, convincing her that it was just a symbolic toast, that 1 glass was not a sin, that everyone did it here. Aisha, feeling pressured and not wanting to appear rude, drank. It was her first sip of alcohol in her life. Her head spun almost immediately. Her partner never showed up. An hour later, Rashid admitted that he had lied, that there was no meeting, that he had invited her because he wanted to be alone with her. Aisha tried to get up, overcome with panic. She said that it was wrong, that she was married, that she had to leave. Rashid took her hand, his voice firm. He said he had been in love with her from the first day, that he thought about her constantly, that he wanted her to be part of his life. Aisha tried to free her hand, but he held it tight. Then he leaned over and kissed her. She pushed him away, jumped up from the table, and ran out of the restaurant. She took a taxi home, crying all the way. Imran was at home. Seeing her condition, he immediately understood that something terrible had happened. Aisha told him everything except about the kiss. She said that Rashid had confessed his feelings to her, that she had left immediately, and that she would never return. Imran was furious. He wanted to go to Rashid immediately, but Aisha begged him not to. She was afraid of a scandal, afraid of losing her job, afraid of deportation. Imran calmed down and said that she should cease all contact with Rashid, that $5,000 was not worth their honor and safety. Aisha agreed. The next day, Aisha ignored Rashid's calls and messages. He called 10 times, wrote, apologizing, begging for a meeting to explain himself. She did not respond. On the 3rd day, the store manager called her. He said that she was being transferred to a different shift, to a different department, to a position with a lower salary. No reason was given. Aisha realized that this was no coincidence. Rashid really did have connections, just as he had threatened. She called him and demanded that he stop. Rashid agreed to meet, but only in person. They met in a cafe. Rashid was calm but insistent. He told her straight out. The store's contract with the shopping center was controlled by a company owned by his cousin. One word from him, and the store would lose its lease, and all employees would be fired, including her. And without a job, her visa would be automatically revoked. She would be deported. And Imran too, because his visa depended on the stability of his job, and a taxi driver whose wife had been caught having an affair with another man would become persona non grata. Aisha listened to him, feeling the walls closing in around her. Rashid continued. He wasn't asking her to do anything shameful right now. He just wanted her to give him a chance, to spend time with him, to get to know him better. He had rented a separate apartment for her in the Dubai Marina area, a luxurious one with a view of the bay. He wanted them to have a place where they could meet, talk, and be together. If she refused, he would ruin her life and her husband's life. If she agreed, he would take care of them both, secure their future in a way they could never have done themselves. Aisha felt cornered. She saw no way out. Rashid was an influential man. He had connections, money, power. She was a nobody, a foreign worker with no rights, completely dependent on her visa and her job. She agreed, hating herself for it. Rashid gave her the keys to the apartment and said he would contact her in a few days. Aisha returned home, feeling like a criminal. She couldn't tell Imran the truth. She was afraid that he would do something reckless and ruin both their lives for good. The next 4 months were a nightmare for Aisha. She met with Rashid 2 or 3 times a week in that apartment. At first, he really just talked to her, had dinner, watched movies, but gradually the boundaries blurred. He touched her, and she didn't resist, paralyzed by fear and a sense of hopelessness. Then he began to demand more. Aisha resisted, cried, begged him to stop. Rashid didn't stop. He reminded her that her whole life depended on a single phone call from him, that he could make her and Imran's life unbearable. Aisha gave in every time, returning home with feelings of shame and self-hatred. Imran noticed the changes. Aisha became distant, silent, and avoided physical intimacy with him. When he asked what was wrong, she replied that she was tired, that she was stressed at work. Imran didn't know how to help her, but he felt like he was losing his wife. He tried to be patient and caring, hoping that things would get better with time. Aisha thought about telling him the truth every day, but her fear was stronger. She was afraid of losing everything they had built over 7 years. The fear of ending up on the street, without a job, without a roof over her head, sent back to Pakistan empty-handed, and with her dreams shattered. 4 months later, Aisha felt that something was wrong with her body. Her period was 3 weeks late. She felt nauseous in the mornings, and her breasts were swollen and sore. She bought a pregnancy test at the pharmacy and took it without Imran knowing. 2 lines. She was pregnant. The horror she felt at that moment was absolute. She knew for sure that the child was not Imran's. They had not been intimate for several months. She had been avoiding his touch under various pretexts. The child was Rashid's. At 8 weeks pregnant, Aisha went to the doctor. She wanted to make sure the test was wrong, but the doctor confirmed it. She was pregnant, about 2 months along. The doctor, a middle-aged woman, congratulated her, asked about her husband's health, and whether they both needed counseling. Aisha couldn't take it. She burst into tears right there in the office. The doctor, alarmed, asked what was wrong. Through her tears, Aisha confessed, "It's not my husband's. I don't know what to do." The doctor listened to her without judgment. She explained that Dubai has strict laws regarding extramarital affairs, and that if the truth came out, Aisha could face deportation or even imprisonment. She offered options: an abortion, which could be done legally for medical reasons, or trying to hide the truth. Aisha couldn't think. She left the clinic and wandered aimlessly through the streets for several hours before deciding to return home. Imran was at home. He had taken the day off. Seeing her face, he immediately understood that something irreparable had happened. He asked directly, "Are you pregnant?" Aisha nodded. Imran hugged her, joyful. "That's wonderful. Why are you crying?" Aisha broke free from his embrace, sat down on the sofa, and covered her face with her hands. "Imran, it's not yours." The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Imran stood motionless, trying to comprehend what he had heard. Then he sat down next to her, his voice quiet but firm. "Explain." Aisha told him everything. About Rashid, about his threats, about how she was forced to meet with him, about how she couldn't refuse, about how she was afraid to tell him, about how she was now pregnant. She spoke without stopping, through her sobs, expecting Imran to hit her, to kick her out, that their marriage was over. Imran listened silently. When she finished, he sat for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he got up and put on his jacket. "I'll be back soon," he said, and left. Aisha was left alone, not knowing if he would ever return. Imran returned 2 hours later. He was calm, but his face was pale. He sat down opposite Aisha and took her hands. "I don't blame you," he said. "You were cornered. That man used his position to manipulate you. It's not your fault. But now we have to decide what to do." Aisha looked at him with gratitude and despair. "We can have an abortion. Forget about all this," Imran suggested. Aisha shook her head. "I can't kill a child. It's a sin. I've already committed so many sins. I can't add another one." Imran realized she was adamant. "Then what? We can't raise his child as our own. I can't do that." Aisha didn't know the answer. They sat in their small apartment, two people whose lives had been destroyed by forces beyond their control, trying to find a way out of a situation from which there was no way out. The night passed in heavy silence. Imran and Aisha lay in the same bed, but there was a gulf between them. Imran lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts racing between rage, pain, and the search for a solution. By morning, he had made his decision. He got up, put on his best clothes, and said to Aisha, "I'm going to see him. He has to answer for what he did." Aisha jumped up and grabbed his arm. "No, please, that will only make things worse. He is an influential man. He has connections. He will destroy us." Imran freed his hand, his face hard. "He has already destroyed us, but I will not let him get away with it." Imran knew where Rashid's office was. He had driven passengers to that area many times and had seen the tall building with the glass facade that housed the headquarters of his hotel empire. He arrived there in the morning and walked through the revolving doors into the marble lobby. The guard at the desk stopped him and asked who he was there to see. Imran gave Rashid al-Maktoum's name. The guard looked at him suspiciously, at his simple clothes and worn shoes. "Do you have an appointment?" Imran replied. "No, but he will see me. Tell him that Aisha's husband is here." The guard called upstairs, spoke to someone, hung up the phone, and said coldly, "You are not allowed to go up. Leave the building." Imran did not move. "I will not leave until I speak to him." The guard called for backup. 2 other guards approached, took Imran by the arms, and began to lead him away. Imran broke free and shouted, "Rashid al-Maktoum! Come out, you coward! My wife is pregnant with your child. You destroyed my family." His voice echoed through the hall. Several employees passing by stopped and turned around. The security guards grabbed Imran more tightly and dragged him to the exit. He continued to shout until they pushed him out onto the street and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. Imran stood on the sidewalk, breathing heavily, his hands shaking with rage and helplessness. He realized that direct confrontation would not work. Rashid was hiding behind the walls of his office, behind security and authority. Imran returned to his car, got behind the wheel, and sat there for several minutes, trying to calm down. Then he decided to try something he had almost given up on, turning to the law. He drove to the nearest police station in the Deira district. He went inside and approached the officer on duty at the desk. The officer, a middle-aged Emirati in uniform, looked at him questioningly. Imran tried to explain the situation. His English was broken, but he tried to be clear. He said he wanted to file a report that an influential man had coerced his wife into a relationship, threatened her with deportation, and used his position of power, that she was now pregnant, and it was not his child, that he wanted justice. The officer listened without emotion. When Imran finished, he asked one question. "Do you have any evidence of coercion? Witnesses? Recordings of threats? Medical reports of violence?" Imran was taken aback. "No, but she will tell you herself. She will confirm it." The officer shook his head. "Without evidence, it's her word against his, and he is a respected citizen of the UAE. Do you understand that extramarital affairs are illegal in our country? If there is no evidence of coercion, then according to the law, your wife committed adultery voluntarily. This carries a penalty of deportation or imprisonment. Are you sure you want to file a report?" Imran felt the ground slipping away from under his feet. He was trying to protect his wife, but the system was against them. The officer continued, "My advice to you as a human being is to go back to your country. Solve these problems there. The law is not on your side here." Imran left the station feeling completely defeated. All avenues were closed. Appealing directly to Rashid had not worked. Appealing to the law would have backfired on Aisha. They were cornered, helpless before a man who had all the power. Imran returned home late in the evening. Aisha was waiting for him, her face pale with anxiety. He told her everything, about the attempt to break into Rashid's office, about the visit to the police, about the officer's words. Aisha listened, and with each word, the hope in her eyes faded. "What now?" she asked quietly. Imran sat down next to her and hugged her. "I don't know, but I won't leave you. We'll figure something out." Over the next 2 days, they discussed their options. Go back to Pakistan? But how could they explain Aisha's pregnancy to their family a few months after their return? Have an abortion? Aisha categorically refused. Try to hide the truth, pass the child off as his own. Imran knew he couldn't live like that every time he looked at the child, he would see Rashid and what he had done to their lives. There was no way out. They were trapped, with no escape. On the 3rd day, in the evening, Imran received a message from an unknown number. It read, "Meet me tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The coordinates are attached. Come alone." The coordinates led to a place outside the city, in a wooded area near the highway leading to Al Ain. Imran showed the message to Aisha. "It's from him," he said. Aisha was frightened. "Don't go. It could be dangerous." Imran shook his head. "Maybe he wants to negotiate. Maybe he'll offer money, help. I have to go." Aisha begged him not to go, but Imran was adamant. The next morning, he drove to the address. The place was deserted, far from the main roads, surrounded by sparse trees and bushes. Imran parked his car and got out. No one was in sight. He waited for about 10 minutes when a black SUV appeared from behind the trees. Rashid got out, alone, without security. He walked up to Imran and stopped a few meters away. "You made a scene in my office," Rashid said calmly. "You yelled across the hall. It was stupid." Imran clenched his fists. "You ruined my life. My wife is pregnant. What are you going to do about that?" Rashid smirked. "I'm not going to do anything. That's your problem, not mine." Imran took a step forward. "You coerced her. You threatened her. You used her." Rashid shrugged. "Do you have any proof? No? Then it's her word against mine, and we both know whose word carries more weight." Imran felt rage wash over him. He lunged at Rashid and punched him in the face. Rashid staggered and fell to the ground. Imran pinned him down and continued to beat him. Rashid tried to defend himself, but Imran was stronger, driven by rage and despair. They wrestled on the ground, kicking up dust. Then Rashid found a rock lying nearby and hit Imran on the head with it. Imran recoiled, blood running down his face. Rashid jumped up, breathing heavily, his expensive shirt torn and stained. "You made a mistake," Rashid croaked, wiping the blood from his split lip. "You attacked me. Now I can call the police, and you'll go to jail for assault." Imran stood up, swaying. "Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore." Rashid looked at him with contempt. "You're pathetic. You know what? Take your wife and get out of the country. I don't want to see you here. I don't want this story to become public knowledge. Take her and get out. That's the only offer you're going to get from me." Imran turned silently and walked to his car. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. Rashid stood watching him go, then got into his SUV and drove off in the opposite direction. Imran returned home with a bruised face and blood-stained clothes. Aisha gasped when she saw him. He told her about the meeting, the fight, and Rashid's last words. Aisha cried as she treated his wound. "What are we going to do?" she asked over and over again. Imran did not answer. He sat staring into space, his mind blank. That night they went to bed exhausted and broken. Imran lay awake, thinking that their lives were irrevocably ruined. Whatever they did, there was no way out. If they went to Pakistan, they would face disgrace. If they stayed in Dubai, Aisha would be deported or imprisoned when the truth about her pregnancy came out. Rashid had won. He had all the power, and he knew it. And they were nobodies. Imran felt something inside him break completely. The next few days passed in painful silence. Imran went to work like a robot, drove passengers around, answered their questions in monosyllables, and in the evening returned home and sat by the window, looking at the city lights. Aisha also continued to work, although her morning sickness was getting worse, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to hide her pregnancy. She wore loose clothing, but she knew that in a few weeks it would become obvious. Her colleagues had already started asking questions, noticing her paleness and frequent trips to the bathroom. She laughed it off, saying she had stomach problems, but she felt the walls closing in around her. Imran was no longer angry. The rage that had burned inside him after meeting Rashid had burned out, leaving only emptiness and fatigue. He thought about his parents, his brothers, what they would say when they found out the truth, about the shame he would bring on his family, about the money they never saved, about the house they never built, about the 7 years of his life in a foreign country that had been wasted. He thought about the child that was to be born, who would carry the blood of the man who had destroyed their lives. And the more he thought, the clearer it became that there was no way out. Aisha felt it too. She saw how Imran was changing, how he was withdrawing into himself, how the light in his eyes was fading. She blamed herself for everything that had happened, for agreeing to Rashid's proposal, for not telling her husband the truth right away, for being weak and allowing herself to be intimidated, for now carrying a child who would be a living reminder of this nightmare. She thought about abortion, but her religious beliefs, instilled in her since childhood, prevented her from taking that step. Killing a child was a sin for which she would answer to God. But giving birth to a child meant the end of everything they knew. On Friday evening, after prayers, Imran and Aisha sat on the floor of their small apartment. Between them lay the Quran, open at a random page. Imran read aloud, his voice quiet and monotonous. Aisha listened with her eyes closed. When he finished, they sat in silence for a long time. Then Imran spoke, without looking at her. "Aisha, I no longer see a way forward," he said. "Whatever we do, Only shame and suffering await us. If we stay here, you will be imprisoned or deported. If we return home, our families will turn their backs on us. Our child will grow up in a world where he will be a bastard, without a father, without a future. I've thought about this day and night, and all I see is darkness." Aisha opened her eyes and looked at him. "What are you trying to say?" Imran finally looked up and met her gaze. "Maybe there is another way, a way that will free us from this torment, from shame, from endless years of suffering." Aisha understood what he was talking about before he said it out loud. Her heart beat faster. "You're talking about death." Imran nodded. "In Islam, suicide is a sin. But isn't what we're going through now worse? Isn't a life of shame, poverty, and a child born of violence and coercion worse than death? Perhaps Allah will forgive us when He sees our suffering. Perhaps this is the only way to end the pain." Aisha was silent for a long time. Part of her wanted to scream that this was madness, that one couldn't think like that. But another part, exhausted and broken, whispered that he was right, that the life that awaited them was unbearable, that it was better to leave now with dignity than to live for years in hell. "How?" she asked quietly. Imran had thought about it. "There's a place outside the city where we used to meet with Rashid, a forest. There's no one there. We can go there at night. I'll get a rope from the garage. It will be quick, painless." Aisha shuddered, but did not object. Imran continued, "We'll leave letters, for our families. We'll explain that it was our choice, that we couldn't live with the shame. We'll ask for forgiveness." They spent the weekend in a strange calm, as if they had made a decision and lifted the burden of uncertainty from themselves. Imran wrote a long letter to his mother and brothers, explaining everything that had happened, without mentioning Rashid's name, but only referring to an influential man who ruined their lives. He apologized for not being able to provide for his family, for causing them pain. He asked them to remember him and Aisha with love, not condemnation. Aisha wrote a similar letter to her parents, begging them to understand and forgive. On Sunday evening, they gathered together. Imran took the rope that the builders had used in his house and put it in a bag. They put on clean clothes, performed ablutions, and prayed, as if preparing for a long journey. Before leaving, Aisha turned around and looked at their small apartment for the last time. At the bed where they slept, at the kitchen where she cooked, at the window from which a piece of the sky was visible. All of this was supposed to be the beginning of their new life. Instead, it became the grave of their dreams. They got into Imran's car and drove to the outskirts of the city. The drive took about an hour. Imran turned off the main highway onto a dirt road leading to a forest plantation that the UAE authorities had created as part of a desert greening project. The trees here were sparse, mostly acacia and tamarisk, but the place was secluded. He stopped the car deep inside, far from the road, where no one would see them until morning. They got out of the car. The night was warm, the sky dotted with stars. Imran found a sturdy tree with a thick branch high enough. He took out a rope and checked its strength. Aisha stood nearby, shivering despite the warm air. "Are you sure?" Imran asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Imran hugged her, and they stood there for a few minutes, holding each other for the last time. Then Imran made 2 loops and attached the rope to the branch. He brought 2 boxes from the car for them to stand on. He placed them under the tree. "I'll go first," he said. "I can't let you die alone." Aisha grabbed his hand. "No, we're together, at the same time." Imran hesitated, then agreed. They stood on the boxes and put the nooses around their necks. Imran took Aisha's hand. "On the count of 3, he said. Aisha nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. 1. Imran squeezed her hand tighter. 2. Aisha closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. 3. They kicked the boxes away at the same time. Imran and Aisha's bodies were found by a local shepherd the next morning. He was grazing his goats in the area and stumbled upon the car, then saw the bodies hanging from the tree. He immediately called the police. Investigators arrived and examined the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, no traces of violence by third parties. 2 sealed envelopes with letters were found in the car. The police read their contents. The story was shocking, but without specific names and evidence, there was nothing to investigate. The official version was closed as a double suicide. The bodies were handed over to the Pakistani embassy, which arranged for their repatriation. Imran and Aisha's families received the letters and the bodies of their children at the same time. Their grief was boundless, mixed with incomprehension and shame. The parents read the letters over and over again, trying to understand how this could have happened. Imran and Aisha were buried in their homeland, in family cemeteries, their graves located in different villages, several hours' drive from each other. The story of their deaths remained within the close circle of family and a few close friends. The embassy did not disclose the information, not wanting to create a diplomatic incident based on unproven allegations against an influential Emirati. Rashid Al Maktoum never learned of their deaths. He continued his life, doing business, buying expensive things, meeting new women. For him, Aisha was just one of many, a fleeting infatuation that he had long forgotten. The case was not investigated further. Officially, it was closed as a tragic case of 2 migrants who could not cope with the pressures of life in a foreign country. 2 lines appeared in the Dubai police statistics: suicides, motive, personal problems. No mention of Rashida, of coercion, of pregnancy. The truth remained buried with Imran and Aisha, known only to their parents, who carried this burden to the end of their days, unable to seek revenge or find justice. On the morning of her wedding, a 28-year-old Ukrainian woman was shot dead in Dubai. The investigation established that the murder was ordered by the 3 official wives of her billionaire fiancé. The 3 women's lives were structured according to a strict and predictable schedule. Fatima, Layla, and Amira were the wives of Khalid Al-Jassim, a 52-year-old construction magnate whose company built dozens of skyscrapers that defined the look of modern Dubai. Each of them lived in her own luxurious villa in the exclusive gated community of Emirates Hills, received a monthly allowance of $50,000, and had a staff of servants. Their worlds never intersected. Khalid spent exactly 10 days a month with each wife and her children, following a strict rotation established many years ago. This arrangement ensured peace and stability in his complex family. Fatima, the first and oldest wife, was 48 years old. She married Khalid when she was 18, and he was just a budding entrepreneur. She bore him 4 children, the eldest of whom was already 29. Fatima considered herself the guardian of family traditions and wielded considerable informal influence in the clan. Layla, the 39-year-old second wife, was the daughter of one of Khalid's former business partners. She had given birth to 3 children and was known for her impulsive nature and love of social life. The third wife, Amira, was the youngest. At 33, she had 2 small children, a law degree from the University of London that she had never used, and a reputation as the most calculating and intellectual of the 3. For 15 years, they coexisted within this system, each in her own golden cage, jealously guarding her status and that of her children. This fragile balance was disrupted in early 2023. At an international business forum in Dubai, Khalid met Oksana Kovalenko. She was 28 years old and worked as a senior marketer at a large international PR company. Her team was promoting Khalid's new flagship project, a 60-story residential complex in the Dubai Marina area. Oksana had come to Dubai from Kiev 3 years earlier. She was ambitious, intelligent, spoke English fluently, and was rapidly advancing her career. Khalid, accustomed to the submissiveness and traditional lifestyle of his wives, was impressed by her energy, sharp mind, and Western style of doing business. Their relationship began as purely business: joint meetings, presentations, business dinners. After 2 months, Khalid began to show her signs of attention that went beyond professional relations. He invited her to the most expensive restaurants, gave her jewelry, and sent huge bouquets to her office. He introduced himself to Oksana as a divorced man, the father of adult children, who had been alone for many years. To back up his words, he showed her fake divorce papers that he had had made to order. Oksana, charmed by his attention, intelligence, and charisma, believed him. She saw him not just as a billionaire, but as a kindred spirit, a strong and caring man with whom she could build a future. Their romance developed rapidly. Khalid rented a luxurious penthouse for her, with a view of the bay in the very area of Dubai Marina that he was developing. He gave her a white Mercedes G-Class worth $180,000. He gave her a monthly allowance of $15,000, explaining that he wanted her to work less and spend more time with him. For Oksana, who was used to achieving everything herself, this was unusual, but she was truly in love. She called her parents in Kiev, breathlessly telling them about her happiness, about the man who had changed her life, about her plans for the future. She believed she had found her love. 8 months after the beginning of their romance, in October 2023, Khalid made Oksana an official proposal. He promised her the lavish European-style wedding she had dreamed of. He said he wanted everything to be official so that her parents could come and share the day with them. He didn't want a traditional Islamic ceremony. He wanted a secular celebration that would match her worldview. Oksana was over the moon. She immediately called her parents in Kiev and invited them to Dubai for the ceremony, scheduled for the end of November. They bought tickets and eagerly prepared to meet their future billionaire son-in-law, whom they thought was a free man. Oksana began preparing for the wedding. She chose a dress, booked a banquet hall at the Burj Al Arab Hotel, and compiled a guest list. She had no idea that her happiness was built on lies, and that those lies had already begun to crack, threatening to collapse and bury her under their rubble. The system Khalid had built failed one evening in late October. Fatima, his first wife, was having dinner with her friends at an expensive French restaurant in Dubai's financial center. It was her free week when Khalid, according to the schedule, was with Amira. At the next table, she saw her husband. He was sitting with a young blonde woman, holding her hand and looking at her with an adoration that Fatima had not seen in his eyes for 20 years. Before her eyes, Khalid took a velvet box out of his pocket, opened it, and slipped a ring with a huge diamond onto the girl's finger. The girl laughed and kissed him. Fatima felt her world, so stable and orderly, crumbling. She did not make a scene. She silently paid the bill, left the restaurant, and drove home. The rage inside her was cold and calculating. The next morning, Fatima contacted a private detective agency. She was willing to pay any price for complete information about her rival. The detective, a former British intelligence officer, took on the case with enthusiasm. A week later, a thick report was lying on Fatima's desk. It contained everything: her name, Oksana Kovalenko, her age, place of work, address of her penthouse in Dubai Marina, dozens of photos taken with a hidden camera. Here they are having dinner. Here they are kissing in the car. Here they are entering the entrance of her house. Copies of bank transfers to her account, documents for the Mercedes she was given, and most importantly, details of the upcoming wedding: the date, place, guest list. Khalid wasn't just going to take on another mistress. He was going to marry her, holding a public ceremony that would make this foreign woman his official wife, albeit by Western standards. Fatima realized that this was a threat not only to her status, but also to the status of his 2 other wives. A 4th wife, permitted under Sharia law, would be integrated into the existing system of rotation and hierarchy. But this Ukrainian woman, with her European views, public romance, and secular wedding, was a completely different phenomenon. She could become not just another wife for Khalid, but his beloved, his main wife, the one who would displace them all from their pedestal. Fatima made an unprecedented decision. She called Layla and Amira and arranged a meeting at her villa. It was the first time in 15 years that the three wives were to be in the same room outside of an official family celebration. Layla and Amira arrived, intrigued and wary. They sat in the living room, keeping their distance. Fatima silently placed the detective's report on the table. They began to look through the photos. Their first reaction was shock. Then it turned to anger. Layla, the most hot-tempered, jumped up, her face contorted with rage. "That slut! How dare he humiliate us like this?" she shouted. Amira, a lawyer, silently studied the documents, her face impassive. Fatima let them vent their initial emotions, then spoke. Her voice was calm and firm. "It's not about the affair," she said. "We all knew he had other women. The point is that he's going to marry her. In a Western ceremony, to make her a public figure. It's a slap in the face to each of us, our families, and our children. If she becomes his wife, especially one he loves, our status will be destroyed. Our maintenance will be cut. Our children's inheritance will be threatened." Layla immediately chimed in. "She must be stopped. At any cost. We must make him abandon her." Amira looked up from her papers. "It's impossible to make him," she said coldly. "He's in love like a boy. He won't give her up. Any scandal will only strengthen his resolve and make us look like jealous fools. We have no legal leverage over him." Silence hung in the room. All three women knew Amira was right. Then Fatima said what she had been thinking all week. "If we can't remove her from his life, then we must remove her from life altogether." Layla looked at her with a mixture of fear and admiration. Amira remained calm. "That's murder," she stated. "In the Emirates, that's punishable by death." "Only if we get caught," Fatima replied. "But we won't get caught. I have connections. My brother controls the security service at the port of Jebel Ali. He knows people who can do any dirty work quietly and professionally. We'll hire someone to do it. It will look like a robbery. A foreign tourist in an expensive car fell victim to street criminals. These things happen. The police will search for them for a couple of weeks and then close the case." Amira thought about it. As a lawyer, she saw all the risks, but as a woman whose established world was under threat, she saw this as the only possible solution. "How much will it cost?" she asked. "I spoke to my brother. $30,000. 2 hitmen. They'll do it clean," Fatima replied. "10,000 each. It's a small price to pay to secure our future." Layla didn't hesitate for a second. "I agree." Amira was silent for a few minutes, weighing the pros and cons. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but everything has to be thought through to the smallest detail. No direct contact. No traces." "When?" "We have 28 days until the wedding," said Fatima. "The perfect day is the morning of the wedding itself. She'll go to the beauty salon. She'll be alone in the car. The attack will take place at dawn, on an empty road. No witnesses." Over the next 3 weeks, the three women, who for years had communicated only through secretaries, began to meet secretly to work out a plan. Fatima found 2 perpetrators through her brother, Pakistani men who were working illegally at the port and had criminal records. They met with them once, in an abandoned warehouse. Fatima gave them half of the money in cash, a photo of Oksana, her car's license plate number, and a detailed schedule of her movements, which she had obtained from the detective. She explained the plan. The attack should look like an attempted robbery that ended tragically. There should be only one shot, so as not to attract unnecessary attention. After the job was done, they had to burn the motorcycle and the weapon and lie low. They would receive the second half of the money after the job was done. Amir, using her legal knowledge, thought out an alibi for each of them. On the day of the murder, Fatima would be at a charity breakfast, Layla at a spa, and Amir herself at a parent-teacher conference at school. All three would be in public, surrounded by witnesses. They communicated via a secure messenger app using code words. Preparing for the holiday meant the murder plan. Gift meant money for the perpetrators, and guest meant Oksana. They were sure they had thought of everything, that their alliance, born of jealousy and fear, would remain a secret, and that the death of an unknown Ukrainian woman would be just another unfortunate incident in Dubai's crime reports. They underestimated only one thing: the effectiveness of the Dubai police and the ubiquitous presence of CCTV cameras in the city they considered their own. November 25th, the wedding day, began for Oksana with a sense of anticipation and happiness. She woke up in her penthouse on the 40th floor as the sun was just rising over the Persian Gulf. Her parents, who had flown in from Kiev 2 days earlier, were staying at a nearby hotel. In the evening, a ceremony at Burj Al Arab and a banquet for 200 guests awaited them. Khalid was supposed to pick her up at noon, but now, at 8:30 in the morning, she was on her way to one of the best beauty salons on Jumeirah Beach Road. She was alone in her white Mercedes G-Class. She turned on her favorite music, sang, and drummed her fingers on the steering wheel. She didn't notice the motorcycle that had followed her out of the parking lot and kept a distance of several cars behind her. At one of the traffic lights on the almost empty morning road, her car was the first in line. The motorcycle with 2 men in helmets pulled up alongside the driver's door. Oksana glanced at them and turned away, waiting for the green light. The passenger on the motorcycle took out a gun with a silencer. He didn't say a word. The first shot shattered the side window and hit Oksana in the head. The second, almost immediately after, hit her in the chest. Her head fell back against the headrest. The Mercedes remained stationary when the green light came on. The motorcycle sped off, turned into the nearest alley, and disappeared. The whole incident took no more than 10 seconds. It was recorded by 4 city cameras from different angles. The driver of the car behind the Mercedes was the first to suspect something was wrong. When the G-Class did not move when the light turned green, he honked his horn. There was no response. After overtaking the car, he saw a broken window and a motionless woman behind the wheel. He immediately called the police. A patrol car and an ambulance arrived in 5 minutes. Paramedics pronounced her dead on the spot. The police cordoned off the area, and an investigation team arrived at the scene. The investigation was led by one of Dubai's best detectives. After reviewing the camera footage, investigators obtained a clear image of the motorcycle and the killers, even though their faces were hidden by helmets. The license plate recognition system did not yield any results. The plate was fake. But one of the cameras captured a unique scratch on the motorcycle's gas tank. The police launched a large-scale search operation. All motorcycle repair shops were checked, and hundreds of bikers were questioned. 12 hours later, a patrol helicopter spotted traces of a fire in the desert, 30 kilometers from the city. The remains of a motorcycle lay on the ground. The scratch on what was left of the fuel tank matched. Investigators assumed that the killers were hiding somewhere nearby. The area was combed with dogs. A few hours later, 2 men were found in an abandoned building used by shepherds. They were the same Pakistanis hired by Fatima. They had no weapons, but experts later found microparticles of gunpowder and glass from the Mercedes window on the clothes of one of them. Only 18 hours had passed since the murder. During their first interrogation, the men confessed to everything. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the prospect of the death penalty, they decided to cooperate with the investigation in the hope of a reduced sentence. They told everything: how they were hired, how much they were paid, who was behind the order. They named Fatima, the first wife of billionaire Khalid. They did not know the names of the other 2 wives, as they had only communicated with her. The detective immediately requested financial information on Fatima's accounts. The check revealed a transfer of $10,000 to the account of one of the arrested Pakistanis. The transfer had been made 3 days earlier. This was direct evidence. Based on this information, a search warrant was obtained for all 3 villas in Emirates Hills, and Fatima was arrested. When the police arrived at Fatima's villa, she was completely calm. She was having lunch with her children, and her alibi was flawless. She had been at a charity event that morning, and dozens of people could confirm this. She denied all charges, calling them absurd. But during the search, a second unregistered phone was found in her office. Technical specialists were able to bypass the security and gain access to the Messenger app. There they found the entire history of the conspiracy. A group chat called Family Council consisted of Fatima, Layla, and Amira. Detailed discussion of the plan, code words, distribution of roles, Amira's fears, and Fatima's insistence. It was irrefutable evidence against all 3. That same evening, the police arrested Layla and Amira. The news of the arrest of the 3 wives of one of the most influential men in the country exploded across the UAE media. It was a scandal of unprecedented proportions. Khalid, who was at the police station at the time giving testimony as the fiancé of the murdered woman, learned of his wife's arrest from the detective. His reaction was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and horror. He refused to believe that the women he had lived with for decades, the mothers of his 9 children, could have done such a thing. But when he was shown printouts of their correspondence, he broke down. In the days that followed, he gave several interviews to international news agencies, including CNN. He cried in front of the camera, saying that he had lost the love of his life, that his wives, blinded by jealousy, had destroyed everything. These interviews provoked mixed reactions. Many sympathized with his grief, but others pointed out that it was his lies and bigamy that were the root cause of the tragedy. The Ukrainian government issued a strong statement demanding that the UAE authorities impose the most severe and just punishment on the murderers of their citizen. Oksana's grief-stricken parents remained in Dubai during the investigation, their interests represented by a lawyer hired by the Ukrainian embassy. They refused to communicate with Khalid. The trial began 2 months later and lasted 6 months. It became the main media event in the Middle East. Each session was covered by dozens of international media outlets. Fatima, Layla, and Amira sat in the dock wearing black abayas, their faces covered. Fatima remained silent. Layla cried. Amira calmly and methodically answered questions, trying to prove that she was against the murder, but had been forced to participate in the conspiracy under pressure from Fatima. Her lawyer presented the court with messages she had written. "This is too risky. We must find another way." But the prosecutor pointed out that after these messages, she did not go to the police and transferred her share of the money to pay for the murder. The prosecution presented the court with a whole array of evidence: confessions from the perpetrators, camera recordings, financial transactions, and, most importantly, correspondence between the 3 wives. The motive was obvious: jealousy and fear of losing status and financial well-being. In May 2024, the court handed down its verdict. The courtroom was packed. Fatima, as the organizer of the crime, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Layla, who actively supported the plan, received 25 years in prison. Amira, despite her attempts to portray herself as a passive participant, was found guilty of complicity in the murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The court took into account her initial hesitation and the fact that she was not the initiator, but emphasized that she had taken no action to prevent the crime and had financed it on an equal footing with the others. It was one of the harshest sentences ever handed down to women from high society in the history of the UAE. 2 Pakistani perpetrators were, as expected, sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out 3 months later. After the verdict was handed down, Khalid al-Jassim immediately filed for divorce from all 3 wives. All their personal property, including villas and bank accounts, was frozen and, by court order, transferred to a trust fund for their 9 children. Khalid himself stepped down from managing his business empire, handing over the reins to his eldest son from Fatima. He virtually disappeared from public view, spending most of his time on his yacht in the Mediterranean. Oksana's parents received $8 million in compensation from Khalid. They returned to Kiev, where they buried their daughter. With the money they received, they established the Oksana Kovalenko Charitable Foundation, which helps Ukrainian women who have been victims of violence abroad. They never publicly forgave Khalid's wives or Khalid himself, considering him the main culprit of the tragedy, whose lies provoked a chain of fatal events. The case sparked widespread public debate in the UAE and throughout the Arab world about polygamy, the status of women in modern society, and the clash between traditional values and the Western way of life. The story of 3 wives who joined forces to murder a young rival became a cautionary tale about how jealousy, fear, and deception can destroy even the richest and most influential families. A 29-year-old nurse from Manila burned alive in her own bedroom a few hours after a court confirmed her right to inherit $12 million. 6 men broke into the house at night with cans of gasoline. Maria Santos arrived in Dubai in 2022 on a contract with a private medical company. She was 27 years old, with a degree from the University of Manila and 3 years of experience working at a city hospital. A salary of $1,200 seemed like a huge amount for a family of 5 living in Quezon City. Her father died of a heart attack when Maria was 19, leaving her mother with 3 children and medical bills. Her younger brothers were in school, and her mother had type 2 diabetes and was unable to work. Maria sent home $800 every month and spent the rest on a room in a dormitory for medical staff in the Dera district and on food. For the first 8 months, she worked in a clinic serving wealthy patients from the Persian Gulf countries. The schedule was grueling: 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, with demanding and often rude patients. Filipinas made up the majority of the nursing staff, and Emirati doctors communicated with them minimally, giving orders through senior nurses. Maria did not complain. Every transfer of money home meant paying for school textbooks for her brothers, insulin for her mother, and repairs to the leaky roof. In October 2022, she was summoned to the clinic director's office. The man, who was about 50 years old, explained the situation briefly. A nurse was needed for a private patient, round-the-clock care at home, an indefinite contract, a salary of $3,000 a month plus room and board. The patient was dying of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and doctors had given him 3 to 6 months to live. The family insisted on home care and refused hospitalization. Maria agreed immediately. $3,000 meant she could send $2,500 home, and her younger brother dreamed of going to university in 2 years. 3 days later, she was taken to a villa in Palm Jumeirah. The artificial palm-shaped archipelago was considered one of the most expensive places to live in Dubai. The villa stood on a private plot overlooking the Persian Gulf, covering an area of about 1,000 square meters. The house had 7 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and separate rooms for the staff. The security guard opened the gate, and the housekeeper led Maria inside. The interior looked austere: marble, dark wood, minimal decor. On the walls hung photographs of a young man in traditional Emirati clothing next to buildings under construction, with captions indicating projects in the Dubai Marina area. Abdullah al-Mansouri lay in a bedroom on the first floor, which had been converted into a hospital ward. A hospital bed, an IV, a heart rate monitor, an oxygen concentrator. The man was 76 years old, but he looked older. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken, his breathing labored. He hardly spoke during the first few days. Maria changed his IVs, monitored his pain medication, and helped with his hygiene. The doctor came twice a week to examine the patient and adjust his morphine dosage. The pain intensified, and Abdullah moaned at night. Maria sat next to him, holding his hand until the medicine took effect. The family rarely visited. 6 sons from 3 wives came once every 2 or 3 weeks, stayed for 10 to 15 minutes, talked among themselves in Arabic, and hardly spoke to their father. The eldest was 52, the youngest 38. They all wore expensive watches, drove the latest model cars, and talked on the phone about business meetings and deals. Maria heard them discussing the sale of one of her father's properties and arguing about the distribution of shares. Abdullah lay with his eyes closed, unresponsive to their presence. After they left, he would sometimes cry silently. Maria wiped his tears with a napkin, asking no questions. A month later, Abdullah began to talk. He asked where she was from, if she had a family, why she had come to work so far away. Maria answered briefly, without going into details. He talked about his life in bits and pieces, between bouts of pain. He was born in Dubai when the city was a fishing village and experienced the oil boom of the 1970s. He started with a small construction company, won his first contract to build a residential complex in 1984, and then went on to dozens of projects. Dubai Marina, Jumeirah Beach residence, part of Burj Khalifa. 3 marriages, 6 sons, a business worth $300 million. He spoke of this without pride, rather with weariness. Maria cooked for him according to his requests. Abdullah could hardly eat because of nausea, but sometimes he asked for chicken broth or rice porridge. She learned to cook several Arabic dishes that he loved in his youth. He ate 2 or 3 spoonfuls and thanked her. He asked her to read the Quran to him, although he himself was not particularly religious. Maria did not speak Arabic, but she found audio recordings of the Quran being read and played them in the evenings. Abdullah listened with his eyes closed, sometimes moving his lips to repeat the words. At night, when the pain became unbearable, he would call her, and she would sit next to him, holding his hand until the morphine took effect. In December, his condition worsened. The doctor increased the dose of painkillers and warned that there was little time left. Abdullah slept 18 hours a day, waking up for short periods, barely recognizing those around him. Maria never left his side, sleeping on a cot in the same room. His sons came once in a month, spent 5 minutes at their father's bedside, and left. The eldest son talked on the phone in the hallway, discussing New Year's plans. The younger one stood at the door, shifting from foot to foot, clearly in a hurry to leave. Before New Year's Eve, Abdullah unexpectedly regained consciousness. He asked Maria to sit next to him and spoke quietly, with long pauses. He said that she was the only person who had treated him like a human being in recent months. His sons were waiting for him to die, as one waits for a business meeting to end. His wives had gone back to their own homes and visited once a month out of politeness. He felt like he was already dead until Maria started caring for him. She made him feel like he still existed. Maria didn't know what to say, so she just squeezed his hand. Abdullah asked for a lawyer. The lawyer arrived 2 days later. He was a man of about 60, dressed in a strict suit with a leather briefcase. He spent about an hour alone with Abdullah, then came out and asked Maria to wait outside. A week later, the lawyer returned with a video camera and 2 witnesses, employees of a notary office. They recorded Abdullah on video for about 30 minutes. Maria waited in another room. No one explained anything to her. After they left, Abdullah lay silently, staring at the ceiling. In the evening, he asked her to stay with him until the end, no matter what happened. He died on January 8, 2023, at 4 in the morning. Maria held his hand as his breathing became irregular, then stopped. The monitor beeped. She turned it off and closed Abdullah's eyes. She called the doctor, who pronounced him dead, then called her eldest son. The family arrived 2 hours later, all 6 sons and 2 of the 3 wives. They filled the house, talked among themselves, and organized the funeral. Maria gathered her things, preparing to leave. The eldest son gave her an envelope with money through the housekeeper, the equivalent of 3 months' salary, saying that her contract was terminated. The funeral took place the next day, according to Islamic tradition. Maria came in a black headscarf and stood apart from the family. The man's sons and relatives filled the mosque, while the women gathered separately. After the burial in the cemetery, no one approached Maria. The eldest son walked past without looking in her direction. The younger one bumped her shoulder as he walked to the car. She heard one of the relatives say a word in Arabic that translated as servant. Maria left in a taxi and returned to the dormitory for medical staff. A week later, Abdullah's lawyer called her. He asked her to come to his office for an important conversation. Maria decided that it was about some formalities related to her work. The office was located in the business district of Dubai, in a high-rise building next to Burj Khalifa. She went up to the 23rd floor, and the secretary showed her into the conference room. Inside were Abdullah's 6 sons, 2 wives, a lawyer, and 2 other men who introduced themselves as the family's lawyers. Maria sat down in the only empty chair opposite them. The lawyer opened a folder, took out a document, and began to read aloud. The will was drawn up on December 15, 2022, certified by a notary, and recorded on video in the presence of 2 witnesses. The lawyer read the clauses in a monotonous voice, translating from Arabic into English. The bulk of the estate was divided among the 6 sons, a construction company, commercial real estate, land, stocks, and bank accounts. The total value of this portion was approximately $280 million. The sons sat with impassive faces, waiting for the formality to end. The lawyer turned the page and continued reading. A villa in Palm Jumeirah, worth $15 million, went to Maria Santos. A penthouse in Burj Khalifa on the 120th floor, worth $8 million, went to Maria Santos. A collection of 5 cars, including a Rolls-Royce Phantom and 2 Bentleys, with a total value of $2 million, was transferred to Maria Santos. A bank account with $12 million was transferred to Maria Santos. The lawyer finished reading and looked up. There was silence in the conference room for several seconds. The eldest son jumped up with such force that his chair fell backward. He shouted in Arabic, waving his arms, his face red. The other brothers also jumped up, shouting over each other. One of the wives covered her face with her hands, while another looked at Maria with cold hatred. The lawyer raised his hand, demanding silence, but the shouting continued. The eldest son switched to English so that Maria could understand everything. He called her a whore who had bewitched the sick old man. He said that she had manipulated a dying man, taken advantage of his weakness. His brothers shouted insults. One spat in Maria's direction, but missed. The lawyer took out his laptop, opened a video file, and turned the screen toward those present. The recording showed Abdullah sitting in bed, with pillows behind his back. The date in the corner of the screen showed December 17, 2022. Abdullah spoke slowly but clearly. His voice was weak, but his words were distinct. He stated that he was of sound mind and full memory, that he was making his decision voluntarily, without any pressure. He explained that Maria Santos had cared for him during the last 3 months of his life, showing him a level of care and humanity that he had not seen from his own family in recent years. Abdullah said that his sons visited him once a month, spending about 10 minutes at his bedside, discussing the division of his property. That they treated him as an obstacle to their inheritance, not as a father. That Maria sat with him at night when he was in pain, read to him, cooked for him, and talked to him like a human being. That she deserved every dollar, every square foot, every item he was leaving her. That this decision was final, that he hoped his sons would find enough honor in themselves not to contest their dying father's will. The video ended. The lawyer closed his laptop. The eldest son said it meant nothing. that his father was under the influence of morphine and couldn't control his words, that Maria had clearly manipulated him and taken advantage of her position. The lawyer replied that a medical examination conducted by an independent psychiatrist the day before the video was recorded confirmed that Abdullah was fully competent at the time the will was drawn up, that the morphine dosage had been reduced 48 hours before the notary's visit, specifically to ensure clarity of mind. The will was drawn up in full compliance with the laws of the United Arab Emirates and could not be contested on the grounds of incapacity. The family's lawyers began asking questions, trying to find loopholes. They asked about dates, witnesses, and procedures. The lawyer responded calmly, providing copies of all documents, medical reports, notary seals, witness statements, video recordings. Everything was perfectly executed. One of the lawyers asked whether Islamic inheritance law, which limits testamentary dispositions to 1/3 of the estate, was applicable. The lawyer explained that Abdullah had taken advantage of the secular laws of the UAE, which allow non-Muslims and, in certain cases, Muslims to dispose of property more freely, especially with regard to real estate in special economic zones such as Palm Jumeirah. The younger son turned to Maria and asked in English how much she wanted to renounce her inheritance. He named the amount of $1 million. Maria was silent, not knowing how to respond. The middle brother raised the bid to $2 million. The older brother said $3 million in cash, immediately, if she signed the waiver right now. The lawyer intervened, saying that Maria had the right to think about the situation, consult with her own lawyer, and that he did not recommend making hasty decisions. Maria stood up and said she needed time. She left the conference room, hearing shouts in Arabic behind her. The next day, the lawyer came to her dormitory. He explained the situation in detail. The will was completely legal, and it was practically impossible to contest it. The family would try. They would file lawsuits, but they had no chance of winning. He warned her that they would try to intimidate her, put pressure on her, and possibly even threaten her. He advised her to hire security, not to go out alone, and not to meet with family members without witnesses. He asked if she understood what she was getting herself into. Maria replied that she needed to call home. She called her mother via video chat. She told her everything. Her mother cried, repeating that it was too dangerous, that she should take the money and come home. Her younger brothers listened silently. Then the eldest, a 20-year-old student, said that the decision was Maria's, but that they would support whatever she chose. Maria did not sleep all night, sitting on her bed in the dorm room she shared with 2 other Filipinas. She thought about Abdullah, how he had held her hand over the past few weeks, how he had said that she had restored his human dignity. In the morning, she called her lawyer and said she would not renounce the inheritance. The family filed a lawsuit in a Dubai court 3 days later. They demanded that the will be declared invalid on the grounds of the testator's mental disorder, undue influence, and inconsistency with Islamic inheritance norms. They hired a PR agency, which began working with local and international media. A week later, Arabic-language newspapers published articles about a Filipino caregiver who had fraudulently obtained millions from a dying sheikh. Posts with Maria's photo were circulated on social media, calling her a gold digger and accusing her of using witchcraft and manipulation. Maria began receiving threats. Messages on social media promised to kill her, rape her, burn her. Strangers recognized her on the street and shouted insults. Once, a woman in a shopping mall approached her and spat in her face, calling her a whore. Security guards removed the woman, but did not detain her. Maria stopped going out alone, and her lawyer hired a private security guard to accompany her everywhere. The Philippine embassy contacted her and offered help, but there was nothing they could really do. Abdullah's sons gave interviews, telling how the devoted caregiver had deceived their sick father. They described Maria as a calculating woman who had deliberately taken the job knowing about the family's situation. They claimed that she had isolated their father from his relatives, controlled access to him, and manipulated his emotions. They cited other cases where foreign workers had deceived wealthy elderly men in the Gulf countries. Public opinion in Dubai and the UAE was largely on their side. The trial began in March 2023. The hearings were held in the Dubai courthouse, closed to the public, but journalists were stationed at the entrance. The family's lawyer presented medical records showing the doses of morphine Abdullah had received. He claimed that such doses could have affected his ability to make rational decisions. Maria's lawyer presented the opinion of a psychiatrist who had examined Abdullah the day before the will was drawn up, confirming his full legal capacity. He presented recordings from the villa's surveillance cameras showing how the sons rarely visited and stayed for only a short time, and how Maria spent 12 to 14 hours a day with Abdullah. Witnesses from the family claimed that Maria behaved inappropriately, was too familiar with Abdullah, and tried to isolate him from his relatives. The villa's housekeeper testified that Maria sometimes closed the bedroom door when the sons came, saying that their father was resting and did not want to see anyone. Maria's lawyer called in a doctor who regularly examined Abdullah. The doctor confirmed that the patient did indeed often ask not to be disturbed when relatives came to visit, that this was his own wish and not the influence of the caregiver. The court requested testimony from other caregivers who had worked with Abdullah before Maria. 2 Filipino women testified that the patient was demanding but polite, that his family rarely visited him even at the beginning of his illness, and that he often spoke of feeling lonely, and that his sons were only interested in his money. The family's lawyer tried to discredit this testimony, claiming that the witnesses were supporting their compatriot out of solidarity. The judge rejected this objection, noting that the testimony was consistent with the objective data from the surveillance cameras. In April, the court summoned a notary and 2 witnesses who were present when the will was drawn up. All 3 confirmed that Abdullah was of sound mind, answered questions clearly, and understood the significance of his actions. They confirmed that he specifically insisted on the video recording to prevent any possible disputes. They also confirmed that he personally requested that an explanation of his motives be included in the will. The notary presented his records, which contained all the procedural details, timestamps, and signatures. The family's lawyer tried to use one last argument. He claimed that the amount of property bequeathed to Maria was disproportionate to her merits, that 3 months of care could not be worth $37 million. This proved the inadequacy of Abdullah's decision and his inability to assess the situation rationally. Maria's lawyer replied that the testator had the absolute right to dispose of his property at his discretion, and that the law did not establish proportionality between services and remuneration in a will. Abdullah left his sons $280 million, so none of them were left without a means of subsistence. The trial lasted 4 months. Hearings were held twice a week, each lasting several hours. Maria attended all of them, sat next to her lawyer, and answered the judge's questions. She was asked about the details of Abdullah's care, their conversations, and her relationship with the family. She answered honestly, without embellishment. She said that she did her job, that she became attached to the patient as a person, but never expected an inheritance. She said she only learned about the will after Abdullah's death and was as shocked as his family. The eldest son testified, describing his relationship with his father. He claimed that they were close, that he visited his father regularly, and that illness and medication had changed Abdullah's personality, making him suspicious and distant. Maria's lawyer presented camera recordings showing the exact dates and times of the sons' visits during the last year of Abdullah's life. The eldest son visited 9 times in 12 months, spending an average of 12 minutes per visit. Several recordings show him talking on the phone while standing by his father's bed. In June 2023, the court issued its ruling. It recognized the will as completely legal and valid. It rejected all of the plaintiff's claims. It ruled that the property and funds specified in the will should be transferred to Maria Santos within 30 days. It ordered the plaintiffs to pay the legal costs of both parties. The decision could be appealed within a month, but Maria's lawyer assessed the chances of overturning the decision as minimal. The family announced their appeal on the same day. The eldest son gave an interview in which he called the court's decision unfair and biased. But their own lawyers explained to them that the appeal would take months and the chances of success were extremely low, that the judge had carefully examined all the evidence, and that the decision was legally sound. They suggested reaching an amicable agreement with Maria, paying her a certain amount in exchange for her relinquishing part of the property. The brothers discussed the options and argued among themselves. The younger ones were ready to accept the situation, while the older ones refused to do so. The lawyer contacted Maria and conveyed the family's informal offer: $5 million in cash, plus a penthouse in Burj Khalifa, in exchange for giving up the villa and the rest of the money. He advised her to seriously consider this option, given the level of hostility from the family, public pressure, and risks to her safety. He said that $5 million would change her life and the lives of her family forever, that fighting for the full amount could drag on for years and cost her her health and peace of mind. Maria refused. She explained that it was not about the money, that Abdullah had entrusted her with his final decision, and that backing down would mean betraying his memory. That his sons treated their father as a source of income, but she saw him as a human being. That she would carry out his will to the end because she had promised him she would stay by his side, no matter what happened. The lawyer tried to change her mind, explaining the real dangers, but Maria was adamant. He sighed, said he would continue to represent her interests, but asked her to at least increase security measures. The court's decision came into force on June 23, 2023. The documents transferring ownership of the villa and penthouse were drawn up at the Dubai Land Department. The bank account with $12 million came under Maria's control. The cars were re-registered in her name. Legally, all the property now belonged to her. The lawyer advised her not to move into the villa right away, to give the family time to accept the situation, but Maria decided otherwise. She said that the villa was Abdullah's home and that she had promised him she would take care of it. She arrived at the villa on the evening of June 24th. The security guard, who had been working on the property for the last 5 years, met her at the gate. The man, about 45 years old, a Pakistani named Rashid, had treated her with respect since the days when she cared for Abdullah. He asked if she was sure of her decision. Maria answered in the affirmative. Rashid opened the gate and escorted her inside. The house was empty. The furniture, Abdullah's personal belongings, and medical equipment were all still in their places. The family had taken only documents and a few photographs. Maria went into the bedroom where Abdullah had died. The hospital bed had been removed and replaced with regular furniture. She opened the windows, letting in the evening air from the bay. She sat down on the sofa, took out her phone, and called her mother. She told her that she had moved into her own house. Her mother cried with joy and fear at the same time, and asked her to be careful. Her younger brothers congratulated her, not fully understanding the magnitude of what had happened. Maria promised to transfer money for their education, for her mother's treatment, and for a new home for the family. After the conversation, she lay down on the sofa, feeling something like relief for the first time in months. The next morning, calls from journalists began. Someone had leaked the information that she had moved into the villa. Reporters gathered at the gate, filming the property through the fence and trying to get a comment. Rashid did not let anyone inside. Maria did not leave the house. By evening, there were fewer journalists, but several cars remained on duty nearby. Photos of the villa appeared on social media with captions saying that the Filipino nanny had taken over the late Sheikh's house. The housekeeper who worked at the villa under Abdullah returned 2 days later. The woman, A 50-year-old Ethiopian named Abiba apologized for testifying against Maria in court. She explained that the family had forced her to do so, threatening her with dismissal and deportation. Maria did not hold a grudge and offered her to continue working on the same terms. Abiba agreed and began cleaning the house and cooking meals. Gradually, life in the villa returned to normal. Maria hired a cook, a gardener, and another security guard. They were all foreign workers, Filipinos, Pakistanis, Indians, people who understood her situation. The lawyer came several times to discuss the legal details. He explained that the family had filed an appeal, but the process was formal, as the decision of the court of first instance was too well-founded. He warned that her son's hostility had not diminished and that she needed to remain vigilant. He advised her to install additional surveillance cameras and hire a personal bodyguard to accompany her outside the villa. Maria agreed to the cameras, but refused permanent security. She said she didn't want to live in fear, that Rashida and the second security guard were enough. On July 1st, she left the villa alone for the first time, without security. She took a taxi to the mall to buy some new clothes. The driver recognized her from a photo in the news and stared at her in the rearview mirror with contempt the whole way. In the shopping center, people turned around and whispered. The saleswoman in the store was coldly polite, but another customer approached and called Maria a prostitute in broken English. The center's security guards came over and took the woman away, but Maria realized that going out in public was dangerous. She returned to the villa and did not leave it again unless absolutely necessary. In mid-July, her lawyer informed her that the appeals court had scheduled a hearing for August. It was a formality, he repeated, but Maria's presence was mandatory. She agreed to attend. Meanwhile, she began receiving strange messages, anonymous emails with threats, messages in messengers from unknown numbers promising revenge. She ignored most of them, but some were too specific, mentioning details of her daily routine and describing the villa from the inside. Rashid suggested that someone from the former staff was leaking information to the family. Maria stepped up security measures. She changed the access codes to the gates, installed cameras around the perimeter, and hired a third security guard for night shifts. She stopped posting anything on social media and asked her mother and brothers not to post photos or information about the family either. Her lawyer approved of these measures, but said that she shouldn't be paranoid, that threats on the internet rarely materialize in reality. Maria wanted to believe him. The appeal hearing took place on August 6th. Maria arrived at the court, accompanied by a security guard. Abdullah's sons sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, staring at her with open hostility. Their lawyer presented the same arguments as in the first trial, adding several new testimonies from distant relatives who claimed that Abdullah had complained to them about the caregiver's intrusiveness. Maria's lawyer easily refuted this testimony, pointing out the lack of documentary evidence and contradictions in the dates. The appeals court judge reviewed the case materials, heard both sides, and announced a recess for deliberation. He returned 2 hours later and read the decision. The appeal was denied. The decision of the court of first instance was upheld. The case was closed for good, with no further appeals possible. Maria felt relieved, but not happy. Her lawyer shook her hand and congratulated her on her final victory. Her sons left the courtroom without saying a word. The older one turned around on his way out and gave Maria a long, heavy look. That evening, Maria called her mother to share the news. The family rejoiced. Her mother prayed, thanking God and the memory of Abdullah. Her younger brothers were already planning to go to university and discussing their majors. Maria promised to pay for everything they needed and asked them to study hard, pursue careers, and become successful people. They promised not to let her down. After the conversation, Maria sat on the terrace of the villa, looking out at the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water orange. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to think about the future. The next morning, the lawyer arrived with the final documents. All the property was finally under her control, with no legal obstacles remaining. He advised her to transfer some of the money to international banks, diversify her assets, and possibly consider investing in real estate outside the UAE. Maria agreed and asked him to take care of it. The lawyer also recommended a financial advisor who would help manage such capital. She made an appointment for the following week. On August 9th, Maria visited the penthouse in Burj Khalifa for the first time. She took the elevator to the 120th floor and opened the door with the key given to her by the lawyer. The apartment was 200 square meters, with panoramic windows overlooking the whole of Dubai. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, and the interior was decorated in shades of gray and white. Abdullah had never lived there. He had bought it as an investment. Maria walked through the rooms, imagining how she could live there. She decided to leave the penthouse as it was for now and focus on the villa. Meanwhile, the family did not give up trying to get at least part of the property back. A week after the appeal, the eldest son tried to contact Maria directly. He called her cell phone, which she rarely used. He asked for a meeting to discuss a settlement agreement. Maria refused, saying that all issues should be resolved through lawyers. The eldest son resorted to threats, saying that she would regret her stubbornness. Maria ended the call, blocked the number, and informed her lawyer about the call. The lawyer contacted the family's lawyer and warned him that direct contact and threats were unacceptable. He received assurances that this would not happen again. But a few days later, Maria began to notice strange activity around the villa. Cars were driving by slowly, clearly surveying the area. People standing on the opposite side of the street, watching the gate. Rashid said they could be journalists or just curious onlookers, but Maria sensed something else. On August 20th, the first serious incident occurred. At night, someone climbed over the fence and tried to break into the villa. The cameras recorded a figure in dark clothing moving along the wall of the house. The guards noticed the intruder, turned on the alarm, and called the police. The figure ran away over the same fence. The police arrived 15 minutes later, inspected the area, and filed a report. The camera footage showed a man of medium build with his face hidden by a mask. There were no signs of a break-in or damage. It seemed that the man was simply surveying the area. The police increased patrols in the area, but there was little they could do. The officer who took the report told Maria directly that she should take her personal safety more seriously. He said that the case had received widespread publicity, that there were people who believed she was guilty of fraud, and that some might act on those beliefs. He advised her to install a higher fence, hire professional security, and possibly move to a more secure location. Maria thanked him, but said she would stay in the villa. The lawyer reacted more harshly. He came the next day and insisted on an immediate move. He said that life is more valuable than any property, that stubbornness could cost her safety. He suggested renting an apartment in a guarded residential complex and temporarily leaving the villa until the situation calmed down. Maria refused. She repeated that she had promised Abdullah to take care of this house and that she would not allow herself to be intimidated. The lawyer realized that it was impossible to change her mind. He insisted at least on installing reinforced locks, an alarm system with a direct connection to the police, and round-the-clock security guards. The next 2 weeks passed relatively calmly. Maria was not bothered. Cars stopped parking in front of the villa, and there were fewer threats on the internet. She began to think that the danger had passed, that the family had finally come to terms with the situation. The lawyer also believed that the worst was behind them, that time was on Maria's side. Public attention to the case was waning, and journalists had moved on to other stories. Life was beginning to return to normal. Maria set about renovating the villa to suit her tastes. She removed some of the old furniture and ordered new, more modern pieces. She hired an interior designer, a Filipina working in Dubai. Together, they planned changes that would preserve the overall structure of the house, but make it more comfortable and less formal. Maria wanted the villa to become a real home, not a museum of Abdullah's memory. She began inviting friends from the Filipino diaspora, organizing small gatherings, and preparing traditional dishes. Gradually, her loneliness receded. Her mother and brothers planned to visit in September. Maria arranged their visas, booked tickets, and prepared rooms. She wanted to show them the villa and the city, to prove that everything that was happening was real and not a dream. Her younger brothers were especially looking forward to the trip, as they had never left the Philippines before. Her mother was worried and afraid of flying, but Maria convinced her that everything would be fine. The visit was planned for 2 weeks in early September. On August 30th, Maria went to the bank to arrange an international transfer to her family for the purchase of a new house in Manila. The meeting with the manager took about an hour. All the documents were prepared, and the money was transferred. As she was leaving the bank, she noticed a man looking at her from across the street. His face seemed familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him before. The man turned away and walked off. Maria got into the car with the driver she had hired for the day and drove back to the villa. On the way, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. In the evening, she called Rashid and asked if he had noticed anything strange. The security guard replied that everything was calm and no one had disturbed the premises. Maria decided that she was being paranoid, that the stress of the last few months was getting to her nerves. She took a shower, had dinner, and went to bed early. She set her alarm for 7 in the morning, planning to meet with a financial advisor to discuss investments. She woke up around 2 in the morning to a strange sound. She lay in the dark, listening. The sound repeated, like the creaking of metal, coming from the black entrance. Maria got up, went to the window, and looked out. The area was lit by streetlights, and everything seemed calm. She decided it was the wind or an animal and went back to bed. But she couldn't sleep, lying with her eyes open, listening to the sounds of the night. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps, quiet, cautious, downstairs on the first floor. Maria grabbed her phone and started dialing Rashid's number. Before she could press the call button, the bedroom door shook from the impact. Someone was trying to open it, jerking the handle. Maria had locked the door before going to bed out of habit, and now the lock was holding. The blows intensified. Several people were hitting the door, trying to break it down. Maria screamed and dialed the security guard's number. Rashid answered in a sleepy voice, and she yelled at him to call the police, that there were people in the house. Rashid said something, but she couldn't hear him, and the door creaked under the blows. Maria threw the phone on the bed, ran to the window and tried to open it. The window wouldn't budge. The lock was jammed. She yanked the handle, banged on the frame, but the window wouldn't open. The door burst open with a crash. Several figures in dark clothes, their faces hidden by masks, rushed into the doorway. Maria recognized them by their silhouettes and movements. They were Abdullah's 6 sons. The eldest was holding a canister, and the others also had canisters in their hands. The smell of gasoline hit her nose before she realized what was happening. They silently doused the room, the furniture, the walls, the floor. Maria backed into a corner, screaming, begging them to stop. The eldest son came closer and splashed gasoline in her direction. The liquid got on her clothes, hair, and skin. Maria covered her face with her hands and continued to scream. The younger son said something in Arabic, and the others laughed. They poured out the contents of all the cans and backed away toward the door. Maria could see their eyes above their masks, cold and determined. The older son took out a lighter. She tried to rush to the door, but they blocked the passage. The older son clicked the lighter and threw it on the floor. The flame flared up instantly, ran across the puddle of gasoline, and engulfed the furniture, walls, and ceiling. The heat hit her face, and smoke filled her lungs. Maria fell to the floor, trying to find air, but there was nothing to breathe. The fire reached her and engulfed her clothes. The pain was unbearable. She stopped screaming. She had no strength left. The brothers stood in the doorway for a few seconds, watching. Then they slammed the door shut and locked it from the outside. Maria heard their footsteps receding down the corridor. Then she heard nothing but the crackling of the flames and her own pulse in her ears. She tried to crawl to the door, but her arms wouldn't obey her. She grabbed something on the floor, a framed photograph of her family, and held it until she lost consciousness. Rashid heard the screams through the phone, which Maria had not had time to turn off. He ran out of the guard room near the gate and ran to the house. He saw smoke billowing from the second-floor window and flames inside the room. He tried to open the front door, but it was locked from the inside. He broke the glass, climbed inside, and ran up the stairs. The bedroom door was closed, and he rammed it with his shoulder, trying to break it down. The heat was so intense that he had to retreat. He took out his phone, called the fire department and the police, and shouted that a person was burning alive inside. The second guard, who was on duty at the far wall of the property, ran over a few minutes later. Together, they tried to break down the door, but the lock held. They used a garden tool as a battering ram, hitting the hinges. The door gave way when the fire had already engulfed the entire room. The heat made it impossible to enter. Rashid tried, burned his hands and face, and retreated. They stood in the hallway, watching helplessly as the room turned into an oven. The screams inside had long since died down. The firefighters arrived 8 minutes after the call. 3 trucks, a team of 12 people. They connected the hoses and began to extinguish the flames. Water flooded the room. Steam mixed with smoke. Visibility was 0. 20 minutes later, the fire was extinguished. The firefighters went inside with flashlights and found a body in the corner of the room. It was charred beyond recognition, curled up in a fetal position, clutching something in its hands. The senior firefighter came out, told the police that the victim was dead, and called a medical examiner. The police cordoned off the area. The officers began questioning the security guards and inspecting the house. Rashid told them about Maria's phone call, about hearing screams and sounds of a struggle. He said he didn't see who exactly broke into the house, that he and his partner were at opposite ends of the property. The second security guard confirmed that he hadn't noticed anything until he saw smoke. Investigators examined the back entrance and found signs of a lock being broken, a professional job, with no clues left at the scene. The medical examiner arrived at 5 in the morning. He examined the body and determined that the cause of death was burns and suffocation from smoke inhalation. The preliminary time of death was around 2:30 a.m. The remains of a photo frame were found in the victim's hands. The glass had melted and the photograph had turned to ash, but the metal frame remained intact. The expert noted that the victim was alive when the fire started, as traces of resistance and attempts to move were clearly visible. The body was taken to the morgue for a full examination and identification. By 7 in the morning, a detective from the Dubai Criminal Police arrived at the scene. The man was about 45 years old, Captain Saeed Al-Kawari, a veteran with 20 years of experience. He examined the scene, studied the traces of arson, the smell of gasoline still lingering in the air. He found empty canisters in the hallway, thrown away in a hurry. He requested recordings from all surveillance cameras installed on the grounds and around the perimeter of the villa. The recordings revealed the entire picture. At 2:04 a.m., 6 men arrived in 2 cars without license plates and stopped 100 meters from the villa. They got out, took the cans out of the trunks, and approached the back entrance. One of them worked on the lock for about 3 minutes, using lockpicks. The door opened, and all 6 went inside. Cameras inside the house recorded their movements through the corridors and up the stairs. Their faces were hidden by masks, but their height, build, and manner of movement were distinguishable. They headed straight for Maria's bedroom, as if they knew exactly where she was. The recording showed how they broke down the door, entered, and doused the room with gasoline. How Maria tried to escape, but they blocked her. How the tallest man threw a lighter. How they locked the door from the outside. How they calmly descended the stairs without rushing and left through the same black entrance. How they got into their cars and drove away. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes from the moment they entered to the moment they left. The operation was planned and executed precisely, without panic. Captain Al-Khawari watched the recordings several times. He asked the technicians to enlarge the frames and improve the image quality. Despite the masks, details were visible. Expensive watches on the wrists of several men, specific clothing, shoes of certain brands. One of the men forgot to take off his ring, a massive gold one with a distinctive design. The technicians took screenshots and sent them for examination. By noon, the victim's identity had been officially confirmed through dental records. Maria Santos, 29 years old, a citizen of the Philippines. The captain contacted the Philippine embassy and reported the death of their citizen under suspicious circumstances. The embassy demanded a full investigation and threatened a diplomatic scandal if the case was swept under the rug. The media had already received the information, and the news began to spread. Maria's lawyer learned of the tragedy from a call from the police. He arrived at the villa, saw the aftermath of the fire, and spoke with Captain Al-Khawari. He said outright that he suspected Abdullah's family and that they had made repeated threats. He provided recordings of telephone conversations, copies of threats from the internet, and documents about legal proceedings. The captain listened carefully and asked for all the materials in writing. By the evening of the same day, August 31st, the police summoned all 6 of Abdullah's sons for questioning. The eldest son appeared with a lawyer and refused to answer questions without him present. The other brothers also brought lawyers, and all gave identical statements. They spent the night at home, slept, and did not go anywhere. Their alibi witnesses were relatives and domestic staff, interested parties. The captain asked them to provide recordings from their home surveillance cameras and to show their cars. All the lawyers stated that a court order was required to seize personal property. The judge issued the order 2 days later, on September 2nd. The police conducted searches of the homes of all 6 brothers at the same time. They found several cans in the younger son's garage, one of which smelled of gasoline. They found masks and gloves in the middle brother's closet. They found lockpicks and burglary tools in the older son's car. They seized all the cars for examination and took DNA and fingerprint samples from all the suspects. The examination showed matches. The DNA on one of the masks belonged to the second son. The fingerprints on the cans matched those of the fourth and fifth sons. Traces of gasoline in the trunk of one of the cars matched the chemical composition of the gasoline from the cans found at the crime scene. Traffic camera footage showed 2 cars without license plates driving toward Maria's villa at around 2 a.m. The technical characteristics of these cars matched those belonging to the brothers. On September 5th, the police arrested all 6 of them. The operation took place early in the morning, simultaneously in different parts of the city. The eldest son was taken from his office, the others from their homes. All were taken to the central police station and placed in pre-trial detention cells. Lawyers protested, demanding release on bail, claiming that the evidence had been fabricated. The judge denied bail, citing the seriousness of the charges and the risk of the suspects fleeing. The case received widespread international attention. The Philippine media wrote about a citizen who was killed for receiving her legal inheritance. Human rights organizations demanded a fair trial and the death penalty for the guilty parties. The Philippine embassy in the Middle East held a press conference at which a representative stated that the case would be a test of the UAE's legal system. The Philippine government sent an official note demanding a full investigation and punishment of those responsible. Maria's family in Manila learned of her death from the news. Her mother fainted from shock and was hospitalized. Her younger brothers gave interviews, crying in front of the cameras, talking about their sister who sacrificed everything for their future. The Filipino community in Dubai organized a memorial service, and hundreds of people came to honor Maria's memory. The embassy helped repatriate the body, which was handed over to the family for burial in her homeland. The funeral took place in Manila on September 12th. Thousands of people came to say goodbye. The coffin was closed due to the condition of the body. Her mother could not stand, so her brothers supported her. Local politicians gave speeches about injustice and protecting Filipino workers abroad. Maria was buried in the family plot of the cemetery, next to her father. Her name, dates of birth and death, and the words chosen by her mother, devoted daughter and sister, were engraved on the tombstone. The trial in Dubai began in October 2023. The prosecution charged all 6 with premeditated murder with extreme cruelty, arson, and unlawful entry. Under UAE law, premeditated murder is punishable by death or life imprisonment. The defendants' lawyers attempted to build their defense on the lack of direct evidence pointing to their clients in the camera recordings due to the masks. But the prosecutor methodically presented the evidence. Camera recordings showing the physique and height of figures matching the defendants, DNA and fingerprint analysis, traffic camera footage, Rashid's testimony that Maria called him, screaming about several attackers, analysis of the brothers' cell phones showing that they exchanged messages on the night of the murder, coordinating their actions, messages in a messaging app, which technical experts recovered, discussing the plan to break into the villa. The eldest son tried to testify, claiming that the messages were falsified and that they had been framed. The prosecutor presented the conclusions of independent IT experts, confirming the authenticity of the data. The lawyers demanded that some of the evidence be excluded, citing procedural violations, but the judge rejected all motions. The case was too high profile, and the pressure from the international community too strong to allow legal manipulation. The trial lasted 3 months. Each hearing was covered by the media, and representatives of the Philippine Embassy were constantly present. Witnesses for the prosecution testified, one after another. The housekeeper Abiba spoke about the threats the family had made against Maria. Maria's colleagues from the clinic described her as a kind and honest person. The lawyer provided records of all court proceedings showing the motive for the crime: revenge for a lost inheritance. The defense tried to portray Maria as a manipulator, but it didn't work. Public opinion turned against the brothers. On social media, they were called murderers and people demanded the maximum punishment. Even local UAE residents, who had previously sympathized with the family, now condemned the brutality of the murder. Burning a woman alive was beyond any cultural or legal justification. On January 6, 2024, the court handed down its verdict. The courtroom was packed, with journalists, embassy representatives, activists, and relatives of the victim attending online via video link. The judge read the verdict for over an hour, explaining the grounds in detail. He found all 6 guilty of the premeditated murder of Maria Santos. The 4 older brothers, including the eldest son, who were directly involved in the arson, were sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to early release. The 2 younger brothers, who provided logistics and acted as accomplices, received 25 years in prison. The defendants' lawyers announced their intention to appeal, but there was no chance of success. The evidence was too strong, and the trial was conducted in accordance with all procedures. International attention to the case ensured that no family connections or money would help mitigate the sentence. The brothers were sent to different prisons to prevent possible collusion or escape. Maria's property, according to her will, drawn up by a lawyer shortly after the court victory, passed to her family in Manila. The villa, penthouse, cars, bank accounts. The total value was $37 million. Their mother sold the villa and penthouse through an agency, unable to bear owning the place where her daughter had died. She invested the money in the Maria Santos Educational Fund, which provides scholarships to Filipino medical students. Her younger brothers graduated from university, one becoming a doctor and the other an engineer. They regularly give interviews about their sister, support the fund, and participate in campaigns to protect the rights of migrant workers. Her mother moved into the new house that Maria had planned to buy for the family. Her health deteriorated after her daughter's death, but she lived for several more years and managed to see her grandchildren. Before her death, she bequeathed part of the money to the Catholic Church, asking them to pray for Maria's soul. Maria Santos's case set a precedent in UAE legal practice. For the first time, members of an influential Emirati family received such harsh sentences for the murder of a foreign worker. The case changed the perception of legal protection for migrant workers in the region. The UAE government tightened laws on violence against domestic workers, introduced mandatory employer checks, and set up a hotline for complaints. The Philippine government used the case as a basis for revising bilateral agreements on the protection of its citizens working abroad. Recruitment agencies began to screen employers more carefully and demand safety guarantees. Maria's story was included in training programs for nurses and caregivers preparing to work abroad as a warning about the possible risks. The villa in Palm Jumeirah was sold for $14 million to a family from Saudi Arabia. The new owners completely renovated the house, removing all traces of the fire and changing the layout. The bedroom where Maria died was turned into a home theater. Local residents sometimes tell the story of the house to tourists, turning the tragedy into an urban legend of revenge and justice. Rashid, the security guard who tried to save Maria, testified in court, crying as he described the last minutes. After the trial, he quit his job, returned to Pakistan, and opened a small shop with the money Maria's family paid him in gratitude. He says he still has nightmares about that night, about the flames, about not being able to break down the door in time. Every year, on the anniversary of Maria's death, he sends a donation to her foundation. Abdullah al-Mansouri is buried in the family cemetery in Dubai. His grave is rarely visited. His sons are in prison, and the rest of his relatives prefer not to associate themselves with his name after the scandal. The business empire he built was divided among his numerous heirs and partially sold off to cover legal costs and compensation. The name al-Mansouri is no longer associated with success in Dubai's business circles, but only with tragedy and shame. The story of Maria Santos remains in the memory of the Filipino diaspora in the UAE as a symbol of injustice and courage. Every year on the anniversary of her death, the community holds a memorial service and raises money for a fund in her name. Women working as nurses and housekeepers remember her story when they face oppression, finding in it the strength to defend their rights. Maria's name is engraved on a memorial plaque in the Philippine church in Dubai, among other compatriots who died abroad. 2 years have passed since the tragedy. 6 brothers are serving their sentences, and their appeals have been rejected. The eldest son died in prison of a heart attack at the age of 54, having refused medical attention. The others continue to serve their sentences with limited contact with the outside world. Their wives divorced them, and their children changed their surnames in an attempt to distance themselves from the family's shame. Maria's mother died in 2025 from complications of diabetes. She is buried next to her daughter. The brothers tend to the graves and bring flowers every week. They are married, have children, and live ordinary middle-class lives. The money from the sale of Maria's property allowed them to get an education, buy houses, and secure a future for their families. They name their children after their sister and tell them about their aunt who sacrificed everything for their happiness. The case is legally closed, but it remains open in the memories of those who knew Maria or heard her story. A 29-year-old woman who came to a foreign country to help her family showed compassion to a dying person, received a reward for her kindness, and paid for it with her life. A story without heroism or epicness, only humanity, greed, and violence. An ordinary tragedy that could have happened anywhere, but happened here, leaving a mark on judicial practice, public consciousness, and the hearts of people demanding justice in an unjust world.